Chapter 541. Moreover, the petrifying worms behind him had also caught up. They spat out large amounts of petrifying gas, sealing off his escape route. Zhou Jin's brows furrowed. He raised his black saber and swung it down. The liquefied petrification gas that attacked him head-on was a fist-sized water droplet, several times larger than the one Zhang Zijing had encountered. The saber chi passed through the water droplet, but the water droplet was not affected at all. However, the soul attack contained within it caused the water droplet to crack, and there were faint traces of it cracking. Its speed was also greatly reduced, and a flaw appeared in the light screen that was covered by the liquid. Zhou Jin immediately wielded his saber and flew above the sacrificial altar. At this point, the second person to cross the stone statue forest had appeared. Moreover, apart from the Worm King in the end, they were unstoppable all the way. It was truly a sight to behold. Papa! Bai Yijian could not help but applaud and smile. Good. 15 breaths, only slightly slower than Shangguan Qing'er last year. It was not difficult to see the praise in his words. Many geniuses exclaimed, "Is the wind resistance sect going to be in the limelight this time?" 2 people passed through the stone statue forest. Realizing this, everyone's heart trembled. Indeed, the Yufeng sect's performance at the Divine Sparrow stage this year was exceptionally eye-catching. Haha, I'll give it a try too. A ghostly voice suddenly came from an inconspicuous corner. It was the black-robed man's Ghost King. The Ghost King took a step forward, and what was very strange was that this step was like teleportation, crossing a third of the area in a single step. Bai Yijian was shocked. To be able to achieve such a terrifying movement technique within the restriction, what a strong physical body. Restrictions could only restrict one's quintessential chi and spiritual energy, slowing down one's movement techniques. However, they did not restrict one's physical body. Therefore, those who relied on their powerful physical bodies were not restricted at all. However, a body that could reach such a speed was definitely not an ordinary body. It could only be achieved by someone who was at least at the level of the fairy realm. Everyone could only see his figure flashing continuously. Every time he moved, he would cover a third of the distance. The petrifying worms didn't even have time to react. Only the petrifying worm king roared, but it was too late to stop the Ghost King. The Ghost King easily crossed over. The entire process only took 10 breaths of time. Such an existence that could easily cross the stone statue forest, as though he was walking on flat ground, caused the entire Divine Sparrow stage to fall silent. Bai Yijian's eyes were filled with surprise and suspicion. He then smiled and said, "Congratulations, my friend." From the way he addressed the Ghost King, it could be seen how fearful he was of the Ghost King. The Ghost King calmly sat cross-legged on the altar, as if he did not hear anything. "All right, let's go," Shangguan Qing said expressionlessly. Later on, "Don't make any unnecessary movements. This restrictive spell is very sensitive, and your futile attacks will only agitate the sleeping petrifying worms. If you cause trouble, even I will be affected." She had to carry 2 people at once, and the 3 of them were crossing at the same time. For her, the pressure was not small. Moreover, she still needed to get into the top 5. Of the 3 people who had crossed the river so far, Zhang Zijing had the longest time of 20 breaths. In other words, if she wanted to help Su Yu and the other 2 enter the top 5, she would need to shorten the time needed to do so by at least 20 breaths. This was a great challenge. Unexpectedly, Su Yu casually said, "I appreciate your good intentions, but I have already said that we will think of a way ourselves." Shangguan Qing'er froze, then said, "Are you serious?" She did not believe that Su Yu could still say such words after experiencing the difficulty of the stone statue forest. Before this, she had treated it as Su Yu acting out of spite. But now, she could not help but think about it seriously. Could Su Yu's ancient bloodline really be able to restrain the petrifying energy? "All right, since you insist, I will not stop you. I will wait for you there." Shangguan Qing'er thought for a moment and did not insist. She then stepped into the stone statue forest. The gazes of the crowd could not help but follow her. They wanted to see how the female genius of the ancient bloodline, whom the all-creation ancestor had taken a liking to, would cross the stone statue forest. However, Shengwan Qing'er was merely flying casually. She relied on the powerful physical body of the fairy realm to easily cross the stone statue forest. She also crossed the last area, the Worm King's area. Throughout the entire process, the petrifying worms did not have much of a reaction, similar to the Ghost King. However, she was slightly faster than the Ghost King. She had only used 8 breaths time. Bai Yijian nodded his head indifferently. The geniuses of the Divine Sparrow stage were a little regretful that they had not seen the power of her ancient bloodline. As for her taking the first place in 8 breaths time, it did not attract much attention. In their hearts, it was normal for Shengwan Qing'er to take the first place. They were not surprised. "Jingyu, let's go. Hold on tight," Su Yu said. Xia Jingyu grabbed Su Yu's belt. She was nervous, not because of the stone statue forest, but because of Su Yu. Where her thoughts were gradually revealed, she was no longer as calm and natural as before. She was now much more cautious. Su Yu did not notice it. His figure moved, and he took a step forward. He had just entered the stone statue forest when Su Yu felt the spirit energy in his body being suppressed. It was difficult for him to circulate it. His light body felt as if he was carrying a mountain on his back. However, this was not the end. Xia Jingyu, who was following closely behind, felt a formless ripple sweeping across the stone statue forest. Su Yu suddenly let out a groan, his body falling straight down. If he had felt like he was carrying a mountain just now, he now felt like he was carrying 10 mountains. Shocked, Su Yu revolved his spirit energy to stabilize his body. Xia Jingyu felt the same pressure. Her body was not as strong as Su Yu's, who had the body of a half-god. Under such heavy pressure, she let out a groan, her body falling uncontrollably. Su Yu raised his hand and grabbed her wrist. Only then was he able to pull her up. However, this meant that Su Yu was carrying 20 mountains on his back. Under such heavy pressure, it was just as Bai Yijian had said, it was difficult for him to even move. Bai Yijian stood with his arms crossed, coldly saying, "Young man, ignore my warning. If you die here, don't blame me for not warning you." Many of the geniuses of the Divine Sparrow stage were shaking their heads. Even fairies might not be able to bring someone safely over safely. This person is just a human king, but his guts are exceptional. Perhaps he is being arrogant? After all, he was invited by an all-creation old monster. Most likely, there is something special about him. However, it looks like the situation is not good. He only has himself to blame for his death. It is a pity that the lady he brought along will die here. Hearing the discussions around her, Xia Jingyu creased her brows, gently saying to the figure in front of her, "Brother Yu, don't worry about me. You should go first." Su Yu's figure swayed, muttering to himself, "Is this all you've got? That's good. It should be easier than I expected." His voice was not loud, but he was not far from the Divine Sparrow stage, and his words were clearly heard by the geniuses. They could not help but freeze on the spot. Was this kid too arrogant, or had he lost his rationality? Su Yu grabbed Xia Jingyu's wrist, floating in the air. His speed was extremely slow, almost as if he was walking step by step. Compared to the people who had crossed before, who could easily teleport hundreds of feet, he was like a snail. However, this was Su Yu's limit. Carrying 20 mountains on his back, any other half-god would not look any better than Su Yu. Oh, he could still walk. I have underestimated him. Bai Yijian's cold face was filled with surprise. However, at this speed, I'm afraid he will die faster than anyone in the past. After which, Bai Yijian shook his head, looking at the remaining people, looking for those who had the potential to cross the stone statue forest. At this moment, Su Yu had already traveled 1,000 feet. With such a slow speed, the petrifying worms had already noticed him, and they were rushing over. 10 thumb-sized petrifying worms surrounded the slow-moving humans from all directions, spitting out a large amount of petrifying energy. Seeing this scene, many people shook their heads, too lazy to watch what would happen next. What a freak! Some people, who couldn't understand Su Yu, couldn't understand why he was courting his own death. Ah, quick, look. However, at this moment, someone let out a sharp cry, as if he had seen a ghost. Many of the geniuses could not help but crease their brows. Could it be that those two fellows had gotten lucky and escaped? When they turned to look, it was as if they had been struck by lightning. They froze on the spot, their eyes wide open. Their pupils were filled with shock. Aegeon heard the voice and looked over. His pupils suddenly shrank, and his cold face was replaced by a look of surprise. This is Su Yu, who was surrounded by petrifying energy, casually waved his hand, and a jaw-dropping scene unfolded. The petrifying energy, which was approaching them, had disappeared into thin air. It was as if a scorching flame had burned the petrifying energy into nothingness. In the eyes of the half-fairy, this was the case. However, in Aegeon's eyes, there was a shapeless flame. As Su Yu waved his hand, the flame exploded, burning the petrifying energy that was near him. The flame even spread along the petrifying energy, burning the 10 petrifying worms that were surrounding him. The 10 worms struggled in pain for a while, before losing their lives. The petrifying worms had been killed. Su Yu had destroyed the petrifying energy with a wave of his hand, as well as the petrifying worms. Su Yu's gaze was calm. He held Xia Jingyu's hand, as if he was taking a stroll in the park. He was neither fast nor slow as he headed straight for the sacrificial altar on the opposite shore. After walking for 1,000 feet, a large number of petrifying worms attacked them. There were more than 100 of them, and they were densely packed. It was as if a black river had covered the earth. This is the reaction of a seal. If the two of them were to travel together, they would definitely attract 10 times the number of petrifying worms. In a breath's time, Su Yu and Xia Jingyu were surrounded by the black tide in the center of a 30-foot radius. The ferocious petrifying worms all spat out a large amount of petrifying energy. The energy was as thick as a dark cloud. With such a dense amount of petrifying energy, even the few people who had successfully passed it could not help but feel fearful. Zhang Zhijing's expression was fearful. With so many petrifying worms attacking him, even his soul defense necklace might not be able to completely defend against them. Zhou Jin's gaze turned serious, locking onto the figure within the fog. Shang Wanqinger was prepared to rush back to save them. The Ghost King had a thoughtful expression, but no one knew what he was thinking. As for the Divine Sparrow stage, it was silent. Chapter 542. Creak. With a dull thud, the crowd could only see the figure in the fog wave his hand. At that moment, the petrifying energy that filled the sky disappeared. The hundreds of petrifying worms that had surrounded him twitched at the same time, then fell silent. All of them had been killed. Another move, and all of the petrifying worms had been killed. How did he do that? Gasps could be heard from the Divine Sparrow stage. Looking at Su Yu, who was like a god of death, killing all of the petrifying worms, the crowd felt their hearts tremble. For the rest of the journey, more petrifying worms rushed over. However, they were all turned to dust with the flick of a finger. There were no exceptions. By the time he reached the center, the number of petrifying worms he had killed was uncountable. There were at least 1,000 of them, including the petrifying worm that was twice the size of a normal worm. The geniuses on the Divine Sparrow stage were speechless, staring at Su Yu's back. The others had used all of their abilities to avoid the petrifying worms, barely escaping the stone statue forest. Who would not be fearful? Only Su Yu was killing, using the worm corpses to pave a path. The crowd was shocked speechless. Su Yu was, without a doubt, the strongest person in history to have crossed the stone statue. On the sacrificial altar, the 4 people who had successfully crossed the stone statue were also stunned. Zhang Zhijing's expression was one of shock and indignation. How is this possible? This lad is just a good-for-nothing who hides behind a woman's back. Where did he get his abilities from? Does he have some sort of treasure on him? Hearing this, Zhou Jin's eyes glowed. Shang Wanqinger opened her beautiful eyes wide, looking at Su Yu's exaggerated method of crossing the stone statue in shock. She could not understand what technique Su Yu had used. Like Aegeon, She could only sense a faintly discernible formless flame. Other than that, there was nothing special about it. At this point, she finally understood why Su Yu had the confidence to bring people across the stone statue. Stepping into the center of the stone statue, Su Yu killed the worm that was 3 times its size with a flick of finger. He then looked around, his eyes burning with a formless flame. This was the formless flame that he had obtained from the white-eyed fireglass frog in the first round of Legacy. It could burn souls. Although most of the flames were suppressed by the divine 9-dragon cauldron, a small portion of them was enough to crush these creatures. However, in order not to be seen through, Su Yu pretended to raise his hand to mislead the onlookers. Stepping on the corpses on the ground, Su Yu calmly said, "If you don't want to die, scram. Those who come, kill without mercy." With a light shout, these intelligent stoneflower insects immediately hesitated and stopped their attacks. They had already sensed that this man had a terrifying power that specialized in restraining them. No matter how many of them went, they would all be courting death. Uft, puffed. A scene that made the genius's jaws drop occurred. A large number of petrifying worms retreated like the tide. Wherever Su Yu passed, the petrifying worms automatically made way for him. Not a single petrifying worm dared to approach him, as if he was their king. Just like that, Su Yu held Xia Jingyu's hand as if he was taking a stroll. They entered an uninhabited area, all the way to the last section, where the petrifying worm king was. The petrifying worm king stood up. It was a head taller than Su Yu, and it stared at him coldly. Su Yu met its gaze, flames burning in his eyes. He calmly said, "Get out of the way." The petrifying worm king let out a ferocious hiss, ready to attack. But after looking at each other for a moment, it gradually lowered its body and crawled to the side. The crowd was already numb from the shock. Even the petrifying worm king chose to retreat. What kind of monster had appeared in the stone statue forest this time around? But what made them even more confused was that Su Yu's gaze turned cold. "Stand there. Who allowed you to leave?" Hearing this, the petrifying worm king turned its head in embarrassment and anger, letting out a fierce hiss. As a king, retreating with its tail between its legs had already caused it to lose face. How could it not be embarrassed by Su Yu's rebuke? Hand over the spiritual liquid of the female worm. Su Yu extended his hand and said firmly, "You only have 3 breaths time to consider." The petrifying worm king was furious. The spiritual liquid of the female worm was used to nurture its offspring. If a normal petrifying worm wanted to grow 2 or 3 times its original size, it had to be baptized by the spiritual liquid of the female worm for a long period of time. How could it give it to an outsider? 1. Su Yu was merciless, calmly saying the word 1. The petrifying worm king spat out threads of liquid petrifying energy from its mouth. Its body gradually arched, looking like it was ready to fight. 2. Su Yu's eyes were filled with flames, letting out shreds of killing intent. The petrifying worm king was not to be outdone, its entire body glowing with ferocity. 3. Su Yu's killing intent appeared, but at this moment, the petrifying worm king's arched body quickly bent down. It spat out a colorful liquid from its mouth and hurriedly crawled away. Su Yu grabbed with his hand, letting out a cold grunt. He took out a ball the size of a thumb, casually smearing it on a stone statue that had been petrified for an unknown period of time. At that moment, the petrified area revealed a fresh, meaty texture. But because he did not continue smearing it, it was once again petrified by the remaining petrifying energy in the air. It was indeed this item. Su Yu's heart shook as he kept it. Then, he easily brought Xia Jingyu to the sacrificial altar. At this moment, everyone looked at Su Yu as if they were looking at a monster. Not only did he kill the petrifying worms, he had even subdued the Worm King. Finally, he had even forced the Worm King to hand over the spiritual liquid of the female worm. Such a domineering attitude was even more chilling than the Worm King's. Bai Yijian came back to his senses, his figure flickering as he appeared in front of Su Yu. He clapped his hands and laughed. "Friend, you are so young, yet you possess such a powerful technique. My eyes are blind, and I did not notice it. My apologies. The seal did not affect by Yi Jian and his clan members, so they had directly crossed over to him. Suyu smiled. I was just lucky. I might not be as lucky next time. His words caused everyone's mouths to twitch. There'll be a next time? You have almost killed all the petrifying worms. Bai Yijian wore a warm smile, satisfied with Su Yu's performance. But with a quick glance, Bai Yijian realized that there were 6 people present. Su Yu and Xia Jingyu, Zheng Zhijing and Zhou Jin, as well as Shangguan Qing'er and the Ghost King. The mysterious heavenly spirit pond can only hold 5 people. You have one more person, Bai Yijian said expressionlessly. His gaze drifted towards Shangguan Qing'er. Miss Qing'er, the spiritual pond is of little use to us fairies. Why don't you give it to the younger generation? Shangguan Qing'er smiled. Indeed, it is of no use to me, but I do not need to give it to others. Bai Yijian was in a difficult position. He looked around and did not care. If that is the case, the 5 of you should discuss it. In other words, one of them was going to be eliminated. Of course, it will be this woman who will be eliminated. She is the extra person. Zheng Zhijing gave a light hum, pointing at Xia Jingyu. All of us relied on our own abilities, and only she was brought here by someone else. Why does she have to take the spot? Although he lusted after Xia Jingyu's beauty, the opportunity was right in front of him. How could he allow others to take it away from him? Suyu nodded. Yes, there are indeed too many people. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure blurred and disappeared. Zheng Zhijing's expression changed, and he let out a cold grunt. You want to fight me? You do not have a right. In his eyes, Suyu had only been able to cross the stone statue forest so arrogantly because he possessed some sort of mysterious, semi-manufactured spiritual artifact. In terms of cultivation level, he was much higher than Suyu, and he had an absolute advantage. Twice in a row, you only know how to hide behind a woman, and you still dare to challenge me. Fine, I'll teach you a lesson. Zheng Zhijing took out a long ruler that was emitting flames. It was a powerful, high-grade divine artifact. With his eyesight, he could easily see Su Yu's path. With a low grunt, he aimed at Su Yu's next path and struck out with the spiritual ruler. It released a terrifying flame that enveloped Su Yu. But before he could rejoice, a crack appeared in the flame. A small golden sword sliced through the raging flames, piercing toward him. Zheng Zhijing instinctively used the spiritual ruler to block it. However, the moment they collided, his hand felt lighter. The spiritual ruler had been sliced into 2. A high-grade divine artifact had been destroyed, just like that, following which, the golden sword pierced through Zheng Zhijing's shoulder without any resistance, causing his body to fall from the altar into the stone statue forest. The tables had turned too quickly. Zhou Jin only had time to let out a furious roar, extending his hand to grab Zheng Zhijing. However, a huge shadow of an insect flashed by leisurely. Zheng Zhijing's falling posture turned into a stone statue. The Worm King had turned him into stone. Even with the spiritual liquid of the female worm, he could not recover. Zheng Zhijing had died just like that. He had made it through the stone statue forest with much difficulty, but he had been knocked off the altar by Su Yu, dying in the stone statue forest. Whoosh! Su Yu grabbed with his palm, retrieving the small golden sword, calmly saying, "This number is just enough." Semi-manufactured spiritual artifact? Everyone present was knowledgeable, and their pupils shrank slightly. Lad, did the Yufeng faction offend you? How dare you attack us so viciously? Zhou Jin's cold and furious voice came from behind Su Yu. Su Yu turned around, his expression calm. He thought there were too many people, so I gave him what he wanted. If you think there are too many people, I can give you what you want. Hearing this, Zhou Jin was furious. Do you really think that you can look down on me just because you have Shangguan Qing'er backing you? Su Yu assumed a fighting stance. You think too much. A coward like you is not worthy of my attention. This has nothing to do with Shangguan Qing. Lad, this is the second time you have humiliated me. Since that is the case, do not blame me for being harsh. Zhou Jin was furious, his eyes glowing fiercely. But at this moment, Bai Yijian calmly said, Why? Are you looking down on me? You have guts to attack me without my permission in my territory. Zhou Jin's expression froze. He slowly retracted his hand, suppressing his anger as he said, I have been rude. Please forgive me, elder. As he spoke, he glared at Suyu, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Suyu shrugged his shoulders, nonchalantly withdrawing his attacking stance. Bai Yijian nodded indifferently. He did not feel any pity for Zhang Zijing's death. All right, since we have enough people, let's head to the spiritual pool immediately. You only have half a day's time. After that, the effects of the spiritual pool will automatically disappear. As for what you get, it will depend on your luck. Chapter 543. Under his lead, the 5 of them followed the stairs and entered the depths of the earth. After about an hour, they finally stopped after descending to an unknown depth. This was not the end of the stairs. Instead, it was a giant cavern that had been artificially created in the middle. The stairs continued to extend deeper underground. At the deepest part of the stairs was the last legacy, the land of legacy of materials. From this, it could be seen that this place was much more heavily guarded than the other legacies. The cavern that they were in was located in the middle of the stairs. It was the stronghold of the protectors. If anyone descended the stairs, they would definitely be pursued by the protectors. It would be extremely difficult to sneak into the land of legacy of materials without anyone knowing. The group entered the cavern. There are many caverns of various sizes that were provided for the protectors to live in. What was strange was that the cavern was dead silent. There was not a single protector in sight. Filled with suspicion, the group arrived at the deepest part of the cavern, in front of a giant light screen. 4 demonic beasts of different colors were flashing on the light screen. Their faces were abnormally ferocious, giving off a frightening feeling. The mountain tumbling formation of the 4 divisions? Shangguan Qinger's eyes flickered, and she was slightly shocked. This kind of formation is an ancient formation that has been lost. Apart from using the blood essence of the person who set it up, only an almighty divine master can break it. Almighty divine masters? Suyu was secretly shocked. This formation was not just ordinarily strong. Bai Yijian nodded. Of course, this is the sacred land of our clan. Naturally, it is well guarded. After saying this, Bai Yijian took out a drop of his blood and sprinkled it on the light screen. With a sizzling sound, the light screen gradually dissolved, revealing a passage that only allowed one person to pass through. Go in. Remember, you only have half a day's time. Suyu's face was filled with anticipation as he entered with Xia Jingyu. The rest of the group entered one after another. After letting them in, Bai Yijian left the place and returned to the sacrificial altar. Whoosh! The young man who had been following behind him flew over. Father, why are you letting outsiders use our sacred land? I do not understand. This half-fairy, who had completed his vital energy crystals, was Bai Yijian's son. Bai Yijian asked, why not? Our people have already left the 5 peaks, and the spiritual pool has been abandoned. It is not a big deal to let these useless people use it. However, the young man was unwilling. That's letting them off too easily. What if they obtain a great fortuitous encounter and obtain a huge breakthrough? Among them, the disciples of the Yufeng faction have a cultivation base of vital energy crystals. If they manage to break through to the fairy realm, wouldn't it be too easy for them? Bai Yijian laughed. Sure, don't be impatient. The mysterious heavenly spiritual pond has been used by us for hundreds of years, and its effects are getting worse by the day. Even now, it is only left with a thin amount of energy. At the very most, it can only form a spiritual energy crystal. It does not even have the effect of turning the spiritual energy crystal into a vital energy crystal. So, how can it help Zhou Jin break through to the fairy realm? Furthermore, it's not the water that's working in the spirit pool, but the spirit stones in the water. The energy emitted by the spirit stones fuses with the water, and that's why the spirit pool exists. As for those spirit stones, we've examined every one of them. More than 90% of them have lost their energy, and the remaining 10% have been invaded by impurities, causing their energy to become impure. They become useless spirit stones. There is only so much energy left in the spirit pool, and it will be used up in half a day. They will not gain much from it, Baijian said mysteriously. This was the reason why he had opened the mysterious heavenly spiritual pond. Hearing this, Baizhi calmed down a little. Let them take advantage of it first. If they can increase their abilities a little, it will be beneficial for us to break through the seal that Tianjizi personally set up. Once it's done, I'll kill them all. That Shangwan Qinger can't forget about escaping as well. Baijian's lips curled into a cold smile. The rest of them can be killed, but that Shangwan Qinger is still a virgin. She has plenty of Vitolene, and if you can collect her Vitolene, it will be very beneficial for you to break through to the fairy realm. Her? Baiji's mind flashed with that pretty face, and he could not help but be tempted. Thank you, Father. All right, continue to host it. See if there are any suitable people among the remaining batch of people. As long as we open the last place of legacy, our bloodline will be freed from the fate of being sealed for hundreds of years. Baijian's eyes were filled with excitement. Deep underground, Suyu passed through the spell, and what he saw was a narrow cave. In the middle of the cave, there was a pool of jade green water. It was only about 10 square meters, and it was rather narrow. It could only fit 5 people at most. However, the jade green pool was emitting a shockingly warm energy. It filled the air, and it was like a fine wine that had been brewing for a long time. Its fragrance filled the air, and it was extremely intoxicating. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. Zhou Jin was the first to choose a spot and enter the spiritual pool. At that moment, the jade green energy in the pool, visible to the naked eye, entered his body through his pores. It nourished the 3 crystals in his dantian, causing them to become even more exquisite. It was a sign that they were being purified. Su Yu and Xia Jingyu chose spots that were adjacent to each other, and they entered the pool right next to each other. A cooling sensation assaulted him abruptly. The gentle energy was like a fish swimming through Su Yu's pores at lightning speed. When the energy entered his dantian, it quickly formed the outline of the 3rd spirit energy crystal. He was about to break through to the level of half-god. Such nature-defying effects made Su Yu secretly happy. The effects of this spiritual pool were nature-defying. In the Zhenlong continent, this was something unimaginable. The jade green energy entered Su Yu's body unceasingly, beginning to fill the spirit energy crystal. Once it was completely formed, he would truly reach the level of half-god. With 2 splashes, Shangwan Qinger and the Ghost King also entered the water. The Ghost King could understand. Although his physical body was at the level of a Ghost King, his cultivation level was still at the level of half-god. He had not even broken through to the level of half-fairy. However, Shangwan Qinger was a fairy realm. The energy in this place was not enough for her to use. Hee, Brother Black Snow, let me help you massage your shoulders. Shangwan Qinger laughed delicately, approaching Su Yu with a smile. Her 2 small hands massaged Su Yu's shoulders. Brother Black Snow, you have worked hard. It was obvious that she was trying to curry favor with him. Su Yu was at a crucial point in his cultivation. How could he have the leisure to care about her? On the other hand, Xia Jingyu, who was at the side, did not immediately start to cultivate like Su Yu. Instead, she kept an eye on Shangwan Qinger. Seeing that this woman was not behaving herself, Xia Jingyu pulled Su Yu to her side, away from Shangwan Qinger. She calmly said, Miss Shangwan, please conduct yourself with dignity. Please do not disturb Brother Yu, if you truly have good intentions for him. Shangwan Qinger was trying to curry favor with Su Yu. She was displeased to be disturbed. You don't know what's good for you. If not for Brother Black Snow, do you think I would be courteous to you? Shangwan Qinger did not hide her threatening tone. With her strength, she could kill Xia Jingyu with just a lift of her palm. It would be as easy as blowing off dust. Xia Jingyu was not afraid. I might not be afraid of you. Humph. With a grunt, Shangwan Qinger did not dare to do anything to Xia Jingyu. She would anger Su Yu even more. After she finished speaking, Shangwan Qinger started to play in the pool, minding her own business. She swam from one end to the other and back to the other end, looking extremely bored. She did not train at all, nor did she absorb the energy in this place. Zhou Jin was furious. He thought about how his junior, Zhang Zijing, had died tragically in the stone statue forest for a spot. In the end, Shangwan Qing'er had used it to play. At that moment, Zhou Jin felt that his junior's death was not worth it. There are so many spiritual stones at the bottom of the pool. Shangwan Qing'er felt bored and took out a stone from the bottom of the pool. It was a grayish-white spiritual stone, only the size of an eyeball. With her perception, she had already discovered it when she entered the spiritual pool. She was just pretending to be surprised. As soon as she spoke, Zhou Jin and the Ghost King immediately stopped cultivating and looked at the spiritual stone in her hand. From the grayish-white spiritual stone, it was not difficult to sense that there was a trace of energy left. It was the jade-green energy in the pool. Could the energy in the pool come from the stones at the bottom of the pool? The two of them immediately grabbed a large number of stones from the bottom of the pool. Unfortunately, they were all grayish-white in color, and the energy within them had already dissipated. As for the Ghost King, one of the spiritual stones he grabbed was jade-green in color, and the energy it contained was extraordinary. However, the Ghost King's eyes immediately darkened. The jade-green spiritual stone was mixed with black, causing the green color to darken. It's a pity that there are impurities mixed in, and the energy within cannot be used. The Ghost King casually threw it away and sighed regretfully. If one were to absorb the impurities rashly, the impurities would damage the meridians, and the dantian would be damaged, and the crystals would shatter. The impurities were equivalent to poison. Although the energy contained in the spiritual stone was pure, it could only be seen and not used. The two of them did not give up and continued to grab. Xia Jingyu was also tempted, and she grabbed a few. Unfortunately, the spiritual stones they grabbed were either grayish-white spiritual stones that had exhausted their energy, or spirit stones that were mixed with various impurities. A mischievous smile flashed past Shangwan Qing'er's face. She had achieved her goal of teasing them. Do you still not understand? This spiritual pool is most likely an abandoned spiritual pool. That's why that fellow is willing to let us use it. Hearing this, the Ghost King was silent for a moment. He sighed and stopped fishing and obediently absorbed the little energy. Zhou Jin was unwilling to give up, and he continued to try a few more times. However, there were indeed more than 90% grayish-white spiritual stones, and there were many impurities in the spiritual stones. They could not be used at all. This fellow is indeed not kind. Zhou Jin cursed in a low voice. Suddenly, he acutely sensed that the jade-green energy in the pool was undergoing a great change. The Ghost King's abdomen seemed to have a vortex, and it was absorbing a large amount of the energy in the pool like a whale. 1% of the energy in the pool was quickly absorbed. Zhou Jin was furious. There was only so much energy in the pool. If the Ghost King absorbed a little more, he would lose a little more. All right, let's see who is faster. Zhou Jin let out a low grunt. The 3 vital energy crystals in his body were all released, and they absorbed the energy crazily. The Ghost King frowned, and he increased his absorption speed. As the two of them absorbed the energy crazily, the energy underwent a great change. Even Su Yu, who was in the midst of training, was shocked awake. He and Xia Jingyu did not have the ability to absorb energy like that. Chapter 544. At that time, it would be difficult to break through to become a half-god, let alone become a half-fairy. Zhou Jin glanced at Su Yu and chuckled. So what if you get the quota? Opportunities are always prepared for the strong. Su Yu's face darkened, but he suddenly noticed the impure spiritual stone in Xia Jingyu's hand. Although he had been cultivating, he was still aware of what was happening in the outside world. Jingyu, do me a favor. Su Yu pondered for a moment, then his eyes flashed. Xia Jingyu nodded without hesitation. Use your water-type magical power to help me collect all the impure spiritual stones. Just like that, Xia Jingyu was confused, but she did as Su Yu asked without hesitation. She weaved signs with her hands, and the water in the spiritual pool began to ripple. There was a turbulent undercurrent at the bottom of the pool. Under the impact of the current, the spiritual stones in the pool were stirred up. Whenever a green spiritual stone appeared, Xia Jingyu would raise her hand and use the current to grab it under her feet. She was extremely efficient, and in less than half an hour, she had already grabbed more than 20 impure spiritual stones. The Ghost King and Zhou Jin were initially wary, but after confirming that they were all impure spiritual stones, they no longer paid attention. As for Shangguan Qinga, she squinted her eyes and looked at Xia Jingyu. Interesting. If I'm not wrong, within the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, you have displayed 9 different water-based techniques. I couldn't tell that you have such a high level of comprehension. Most people can cultivate 3 techniques at the same time, and it's already quite good. You're an anomaly. Xia Jingyu did not reply, but focused on collecting the green spiritual stones. Finally, after an hour, all the impure spiritual stones in the spiritual pool had been collected by Xia Jingyu. There were more than 80 of them, all lying quietly under her feet. Xia Jingyu wiped the sweat from her forehead, her face flushed. "Brother Yu, it's done." Su Yu smiled gratefully, then reached out with his right hand to grab one of the spiritual stones. Without anyone noticing, a picture of a vast galaxy gradually appeared on his palm. It was the Emperor-based Saint artifact, the Milky Way star sand. According to Tianjizi's message, this item only had one function, and that was to purify. Now, he finally had a chance to try purifying the impure spiritual stones. When the pattern came into contact with the spiritual stone, Su Yu felt his palm heat up. It was as if something warm had flowed out of his palm and entered the spiritual stone. Then, the warm current returned. Opening his palm, he saw that it was a dark green spirit stone. It was sparkling and translucent, like a pure emerald. Not only did it not have any impurities, it didn't even have a single flaw. Even the green energy was twice as pure as before. It would not be an exaggeration to say that this spirit stone was even purer than an intact spirit stone. It was purified. Moreover, it was an extremely deep level of purification. Even the energy itself was purified. So he was overjoyed. Was this the power of an emperor-based saint artifact? It could ignore the rules of the world and go against it. Even in all creations, old monster might not be able to purify a spirit stone that contained impurities. Even if he could do it, he would need to spend a lot of time and pay a huge price. However, for an emperor-based saint weapon, it would only take a blink of an eye. Its miraculous effects caused Su Yu to be shocked speechless. This treasure was indeed extraordinary. After a long while, Su Yu finally calmed down. He extended his palm towards Xia Jingyu. "Jingyu, give me your hand." Xia Jingyu knew that Su Yu was preparing to cultivate, so she extended her fair and tender hand without hesitation, allowing Su Yu to hold it. Her face turned slightly red. Although she had held hands with Su Yu many times, it made her heart beat faster every time. At that moment, she suddenly felt a warm current pass from Su Yu's palm into her body. This energy was even purer than the energy in the pool, and it was even more majestic. The outline of the third spirit energy crystal in her body instantly took shape, and it was already 1/10 complete. This is... Xia Jingyu glanced at the spirit stone in Su Yu's right hand. It was quickly turning gray, and she was secretly shocked. Could Su Yu forcefully absorb the impurities? After absorbing the first spirit stone, Su Yu's heart shook. He stored the wasted spirit stone into his space ring to prevent it from being discovered. Picking up the second spirit stone, Su Yu secretly purified it, continuously absorbing the terrifyingly pure energy within the spirit stone. Su Yu kept half of it for himself, while he transferred the other half into Xia Jingyu's body. The two of them started to condense the third spirit energy crystal at the same time. Everything was carried out in secret. 2 hours later, out of the 80 spirit stones, they had used up 20 of them. A vortex appeared on top of their heads at the same time, and the surrounding spirit energy was crazily channeled into their bodies. Shangguan Qinga, who was playing around, looked at Su Yu and Xia Jingyu in surprise. breaking through to half-god at the same time. The Ghost King and Zhou Jin also opened their eyes simultaneously, looking at the two of them in surprise. A third of the energy in the pool had been divided between the two of them. So where did Su Yu and Xia Jingyu get the energy to break through? Could it be that they were already infinitely close to half-god cultivation, and thus broke through by absorbing a little of the energy? Thinking about it, this was the only possibility. However, 2 hours later, buzz, 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 two vortexes suddenly appeared above the spirit pool, and a boundless amount of spirit energy gathered. It was like a liquid, extremely dense. This is the sign of breaking through to half-god. Shangguan Qing'er and Zhou Jin first looked at the Ghost King. His cultivation was at the peak of half-god, and he was about to condense the vital energy crystal. However, the Ghost King was equally shocked. The three of them looked at Su Yu and Xia Jingyu at the same time. The spirit energy in their bodies was surging, and they had reached the limits of their bodies. If the spirit energy continued to surge, their bodies would definitely collapse. It's them. How is this possible? The Ghost King was the most shocked. He was also a half-god, and he was a top-notch half-god. No matter what, he was much closer to the fairy realm than Su Yu and Zhou Jin, who had just become half-gods. Moreover, he had absorbed close to half of the energy in the spirit pool, while Su Yu and Xia Jingyu had not absorbed much. However, the strange thing was that they had just broken through to half-god, and now they had broken through to half-god in one go, while the Ghost King, who had absorbed so much energy, was still stuck at the half-god realm. With such a strange and distinct contrast, even if they did not understand what was going on, they should have understood that something was wrong. Shangguan Qing'er looked at Su Yu suspiciously, her eyes darting back and forth. Finally, she noticed that there were only 2 or 3 impure spiritual stones left under Su Yu's feet. Could it be that you can absorb the impure energy? Shangguan Qing'er's mind was racing, and she cried out in surprise. Even she did not dare to absorb the impure energy, but Su Yu could use it as training energy, ignoring the toxic impurities. Zhou Jin and the Ghost King were both shocked. Could he even absorb this kind of energy? The Ghost King's eyes shone brightly, while Zhou Jin's eyes were filled with greed. Su Yu had a precious treasure on him. What kind of nature-defying treasure was it to be able to turn the impure energy into his own? Am I being suspected? Su Yu saw the three of them looking at him, and he was secretly on his guard. Shangguan Qing'er's eyes, which were staring at Su Yu, became deeper and deeper, as if she was trying to see through him. Su Yu's heart trembled slightly. One was a fairy, one had a fairy body, and the last one had a top vital energy crystal. Su Yu had some confidence in dealing with one of them, but if the three of them attacked him together, the outcome would be difficult to predict. Brother Black Snowy, Shangguan Qing'er slowly approached him. Su Yu's expression turned serious, and the 3 small golden swords in his sleeves were ready to be thrown out at any time. However, at that moment, Shangguan Qing'er's small face suddenly revealed a look of surprise. Haha, Brother Black Snow really has the bloodline of the ancient times. To be able to absorb the impure energy, it's unbelievable. No wonder my master insisted that I bring you back. Hearing this, Zhou Jin and the Ghost King were stunned. Bloodline of the ancient times? Could it be that Su Yu really had the bloodline of the ancient times? If that was the case, it might really make sense. According to the ancient books, the bloodline of the ancient times had the nature-defying ability to ignore the rules of the universe. To be able to absorb the impure energy, it might be a type of bloodline of the ancient times. At that moment, Zhou Jin gave up on the idea of attacking. If he really had the bloodline of the ancient times, there would be no benefit in killing Su Yu. Instead, he would have a conflict with Shangguan Qing'er. With her around, it would be difficult for him to kill Su Yu. The Ghost King thought for a moment, then looked away expressionlessly. Su Yu's eyeballs moved slightly, neither denying nor admitting it. He silently continued to complete the most crucial breakthrough. When Shangguan Qing'er saw his actions, she was even more certain of what he was thinking. Su Yu had the bloodline of the ancient times that could absorb impure energy. At that moment, Su Yu was at the most crucial moment. The 3 spiritual energy crystals in his body were full and could no longer contain the excess spiritual energy in his body. In fact, because of the excessive spiritual energy, cracks had appeared on the surface of the spiritual energy crystals. This was a warning sign that the spiritual energy had reached its limit. At the same time, the spiritual energy from the outside world continued to surge into his body. His body was like a balloon that was about to explode. If he did not channel the spiritual energy, he might really explode and die. At that moment, one of the 3 spiritual energy crystals in his dantian started to change under the immense spiritual pressure. Under the immense pressure, the spiritual energy crystal shrunk. Inside the crystal, a crystal that was different from the spiritual energy crystals started to change. What was contained within the crystal was the vital energy that only strong martial artists of the half-fairy and fairy realm possessed. The spiritual energy crystal started to change into a vital energy crystal. As the spiritual energy above his head became stronger, the spiritual pressure in his dantian became stronger. The crystal was continuously compressed. Inside the crystal, more and more vital energy crystals appeared. The process seemed slow, but it happened very quickly. After a cup of tea's time, Su Yu's vital energy crystal was already 90% transformed into a vital energy crystal. As the last lump of spiritual energy above his head poured into Su Yu's body, the last 10% of the spiritual energy crystal had completely transformed into a vital energy crystal. At that moment, Su Yu had finally stepped into the half-fairy level and possessed a vital energy crystal. This meant that he could now use his vital energy. Su Yu had already experienced the difference between the spiritual energy and vital energy of the same magical treasure. With his vital energy crystal, Su Yu estimated that his battle power could increase by 30%. At the same time, Xia Jingyu had also completed the transformation of the vital energy crystal. It was a breathtakingly beautiful face with a rosy glow emitting a divine light. She was already beautiful, but now she looked even more noble and beautiful. Thank you, Brother Yu. Xia Jingyu's beautiful eyes were filled with joy and gratitude. Su Yu laughed. Owe you a lot. This little bit of compensation is nothing. Zhou Jin and the Ghost King had complicated looks in their eyes. The 2 of them had risked their lives to fight for the energy in the spiritual pool, but Su Yu had easily obtained 10 times more energy than them, easily breaking through to the half-fairy level. Such a comparison could not help but be dejected. Bai Yijian had predicted that they would need half a day to use up all the energy in the pool. But now, only 4 hours had passed. Seeing that there was still some time left, Su Yu slowly closed his eyes and began to consolidate the cultivation that he had just achieved. Secretly, his soul entered the 9 jade spiritual pearl, bringing with it the spiritual liquid of the female worm. Wu Aoyue was sitting on the ground under the shade of a tree. She was bent over and very seriously weaving the thunder armor. The weaving process of the armor was quite complicated. First, the thunder herb had to be peeled off and its thin stem was extracted. Then, it was continuously refined with spiritual energy, squeezing out all the impurities and water in the stem. Only then would it be possible to obtain a useful silk thread. There were thousands of such thin stems in a single thunder herb. Extracting all of them required a lot of time and energy. At that moment, she had successfully extracted a thunder herb and obtained a ball of silk thread. Sensing movement, Wu Aoyue raised her head subconsciously. Her forehead was dripping with sweat, reflecting a 5-colored light in the air. Master! Wu Aoyue hurriedly put down the item in her hands and stood up to greet him. Su Yu gestured with his palm. No need to be so polite. Continue with your work. After saying this, he casually threw over the extra purified spiritual stones. You have done well. Take these and use them. Wu Aoyue subconsciously caught them. When she looked at them, she could not help but be shocked. What is this? What pure energy? It is even purer than crystals. Wu Aoyue tried to absorb some of the energy. Her dantian suddenly felt like it was expanding. This was a sign that she was about to break through to half fairy. A look of shock appeared on his face. What a powerful energy! After recovering from her shock, Wu Aoyue bowed. Thank you, master. First, she had the incredible feather spiritual pomegranate. Now, she had this kind of spiritual stone. Breaking through to half fairy was just around the corner. Suyu waved his hand without turning his head and entered the house. Looking at his back, Wu Aoyue's resentment lessened. In all fairness, if she had not been enslaved, Suyu's character would have been worthy of admiration. Her lips trembled slightly. Wu Aoyue could no longer understand her own emotions. She did not know whether she should be excited about her continuous gains or continue to hate Suyu. Suyu, who was completely unaware of this, entered the house and pulled open a cabinet. Shengji's stone statue was standing quietly inside. Hee, you are quite lucky. You got the spiritual liquid faster than I expected. So you took out a ball of the female worm's spiritual liquid and smeared it on her face. Cracks appeared on Shengji's face, and layers of stone skin fell off, revealing the delicate skin underneath. Ah, pooey. Once the spiritual liquid was removed, Shenggu gasped for breath, occasionally spitting out the stone residue in her mouth. She looked haggard and dispirited. She did not have the elegance of a heavenly ghost. She was in a sorry state, so he did not have much time. As he smeared the liquid on the rest of her body, he said, "Quickly recover from your injuries. The fierce battle will begin soon. Although it is just a premonition, I can feel that the descendants of the guards are plotting something big." Shenggu bit her lips, as if she would bite Suyu at any moment. She replied reluctantly, "Do I have a choice?" Suyu glanced at her, calmly saying, "It is good that you understand. You had better not disappoint me. All right, take my words to heart." After saying this, he left the thatched cottage. As he passed by the nursery, he took a look. The heavenly orchid silver bamboo still did not show any signs of germination. Suyu could not help but wonder if the two seeds had really died. Shaking his head, Suyu's soul returned to his body. When he opened his eyes, he was shocked to find that the 4 divisions mountain tumbling formation had already been activated. It had not been opened by Yijian. Instead, it had been destroyed by some kind of extremely frightening energy. It had torn open a giant hole and destroyed it. The 4 divisions mountain tumbling formation was a powerful formation that even a later stage fairy could not deal with. What kind of monster could be so terrifying? Could the silver puppet have descended? Looking around, Suyu's heart sank. In the whole spiritual pool, only Suyu was left sitting cross-legged. The rest of the people had all disappeared. Even Xia Jingyu had disappeared. Suyu was the only one left in the world that was so silent that it made one's hair stand on end. Chapter 545. Just as Suyu was feeling bewildered, a beautiful figure suddenly appeared outside the door. Her entire body was shrouded in a watery mist. Who else could it be other than Xia Jingyu? "You're finally awake." Xia Jingyu didn't know if she was pleasantly surprised, anxious, or both. Suyu heaved a sigh of relief. Her disappearance had caused Suyu to panic. Unknowingly, this woman, who had sacrificed so much for him, had left a deep impression in his heart. "What happened?" Suyu asked in surprise. A joyous expression appeared on Xia Jingyu's face. She had always been indifferent, and she rarely showed such an expression. Suyu was quite confused by this. "So you don't talk anymore. Come with me. A real spirit has appeared." Xia Jingyu's face was filled with joy. Real spirit? Suyu felt as if he had been struck by lightning. A real spirit was a godly existence even in the Jiuzhou continent. In fact, it was even rarer than all creation's old monsters. In the Thunder Emperor's 9 books, Suyu had seen a brief introduction to real spirits. Every real spirit was an existence that surpassed all creation's old monsters, and they possessed power that surpassed all others. In the past, a heavily injured Thunder attribute ancient real spirit had fallen into the 18 blessed and heavenly lands. It had been chased by 3 all creation's old monsters. In the end, the 3 all creation's old monsters never returned, and their corpses were never found. All that was found were scattered bone ashes. All 3 of them had died, and not even their bones were left. Now that he heard the word real spirit again, How could he not be shocked? Tianjizi's last words did not mention that there was a real spirit in the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion. That was a baby, and it had not yet matured. It looked like it had just hatched. Xia Jingyu's beautiful eyes were filled with excitement as she explained. Baby? Suyu understood. If it had been a matured real spirit, Xia Jingyu would not have been able to escape. Who discovered it? Why did it appear in the legacy of materials? Suyu was deep in thought. The appearance of this real spirit was unimaginable, and it was extremely unusual. Hearing this, Xia Jingyu wore a strange look as she looked at Suyu. We were training near the spiritual pool when the 4 divisions mountain tumbling formation was suddenly torn apart, and that real spirit barged in. Suddenly barging in? Suyu furrowed his brows. As far as I know, real spirits possess extremely high spirituality, and even young real spirits possess extremely high intelligence. So, why did it barge in here for no reason? Is it because of the spirit pool? Xia Jingyu looked at Suyu strangely. I need to ask you about that. Me? Suyu was stunned. He had been immersed in the 9 jade spiritual pearl all this while. So how could he have known what was happening in the outside world? That larva's target is you. Xia Jingyu said, if Shangguan Qing'er had not reacted in time and blocked it, I'm afraid that the real spirit would have pounced on you and killed you while you were meditating. Did the real spirit come for Suyu? Suyu was shocked and at a loss. He could not understand how he had provoked a real spirit. What about them? Suyu's eyes flickered with excitement. If he could capture such an existence and raise it up, he would definitely be able to obtain a young real spirit. Just thinking about it was enough to excite one's heart. Even the all creation's old monsters would not be able to avoid this. Let's chase after it too. Suyu quickly made a decision. Xia Jingyu's face lit up. I came back to inform you. I will definitely help brother you catch the real spirit. Suyu was startled. Had Xia Jingyu never thought about taking the real spirit for herself? Did she only have Suyu in her heart and not him? Suyu's heart became even heavier, and he felt an indescribable pressure. All right, thank you. Suyu nodded. His body was like the wind as he left through the torn light screen. Xia Jingyu's face was filled with anticipation. That real spirit has barged into the staircase below. Shangguan Qing'er and the others have already forced it into a large formation. They are currently trying to break the formation, so I came back to inform you. Is that so? It seems like time is of the essence. As he thought of this, the vital energy crystal in Suyu's body immediately released a large amount of vital energy. Suyu felt an unprecedented amount of energy surge within his body, giving him an indescribable feeling of power. Is this vital energy? It is more than 5 times stronger than the energy produced by spiritual energy. Suyu was inwardly delighted as he felt vital energy for the first time. After spending such a long time, he had finally managed to condense vital energy. With his 1 crystal half-fairy cultivation, there shouldn't be many half-fairies who could rival him. The only ones he had to be wary of were the fairy realm experts. However, he was only wary of them. If he was forced into a corner, he might still be able to put up a fight. As he was infused with vital energy, Suyu's movement technique became more than twice as fast as before. In just a few minutes, they had reached the end of the staircase, which was a vast starry sky. It really was a starry sky. As he stood at the end of the staircase and looked at the scene before him, Suyu was slightly stunned. At the end of the staircase, there wasn't a stone wall. Instead, it was a starry sky, which was shining with a brilliant silver light. Numerous shining stars were like bright pearls in the night sky, which were embellished in the darkness of the night. They formed a starry sky that was no different from the starry sky. There were many galaxies and countless nebulas, which were exactly the same as the Milky Way seen in the outside world. The sun, the moon, and the stars were all moving around in the starry sky in their own strange ways, creating many bright lights that flickered before disappearing. This is a formation? Suyu asked in a serious voice after observing it for a while. At the end of the staircase, there were still a few people standing there, staring at the starry sky. Shangguan Qing'er, the Ghost King, and Zhou Jin all seemed to be exhausted. They were looking at the starry sky in a daze, anxious, helpless, and unwilling. That's right, it's a formation. Shangguan Qing'er turned to look at Su Yu. She wasn't in the mood to tease him, so she said in a deep voice, "It's still the most troublesome, wisest galaxy formation. In the 18 blessed and heavenly lands, the wisest galaxy formation is known as the strongest defensive formation. It's even stronger than the 4 divisions mountain tumbling formation. It's not something we can break." Shangguan Qing'er was secretly annoyed. In fact, this formation had existed for a long time, and its power was far inferior to the real wisest galaxy formation. With her fairy realm fighting power, it wasn't impossible for her to break it with brute force. However, there was another seal in the center of the formation. Anyone whose cultivation was higher than the fairy realm would be forcibly transferred out of the wisest galaxy formation and back to the staircase. Hence, no matter how close Shangguan Qing'er got to the center of the formation, she would be transferred back. She wouldn't have the chance to get close to the center of the formation, so all her efforts would be in vain. The most detestable thing was that the infant real spirit was extremely intelligent, and it was hiding in the center of the formation on purpose. As such, Shangguan Qing'er could only look on helplessly, unable to do anything about it. Sensing Su Yu's arrival, Zhou Jin furrowed his brows, and the Ghost King was a little displeased. The infant real spirit was something that could only be found by chance, and one more person meant one more competitor. Chapter 546. At first glance, it looked like a black cocoon. Zhou Jin transformed into a black ball of light. With a low grunt, his body charged into the starry sky. Suddenly, a very strange scene appeared. Zhou Jin's speed was extremely fast, but when he entered the starry sky, in the eyes of the people on the stairs, his movements seemed to have been slowed down by 10 times. His movements were slow, as if he was walking slowly. The sun, moon, and stars in the starry sky continued to move in their original strange way. Their speed was not fast, but to Zhou Jin, who was 10 times slower, it was like a flash of lightning. What was even more peculiar was that those simple trajectories seemed to be filled with an extremely mysterious meaning. Bang! A star fiercely collided with Zhou Jin, sending him flying. Then a second star hit him, sending him flying again. But just as it stopped, a third star hit him again with a mysterious trajectory. Just like that, 9 times in a row, the trajectory of the stars did not change, but every star hit Zhou Jin accurately, sending him flying back down the stairs. That's it. No matter how we enter, we will always be knocked back like this. Xia Jingyu said helplessly. She had suffered from this formation before. The Ghost King sighed, looking at the center of the formation with regret. Shangguan Qing'er's small face was filled with dissatisfaction. Humph, I don't believe I can't enter. Whoosh, as a fairy, Shangguan Qing'er's speed was much faster than Zhou Jin's after entering the starry sky. But the strange thing was, there was still a star that directly hit her body. Even more strangely, although she was trying her best to avoid it, she could not avoid it. She was knocked to the side. Then, the second star crashed into his body. Seeing that the third star was about to hit her body, Shangguan Qing'er was enraged. She snorted coldly and took out a wooden puppet. It was an extremely blurry wooden puppet. One could only see its outline, but not its facial features. It could be vaguely seen that it was in the shape of a woman. When the puppet appeared, Su Yu's heart trembled. The puppet's body emitted a very strange wave. When it came into contact with the wave, Su Yu's blind eyes produced a ray of light. The strangest thing was that Su Yu's abilities, which had been sealed due to his blindness, were all released. The power of time, the power of space, and the pure divinity were all released. Although he couldn't unleash his full power, it was still shocking. Who was the owner of the wooden puppet? The waves emitted by it could actually heal Su Yu's eyes. The Ghost King and Zhou Jin, on the other hand, were filled with fear. They looked at the puppet warily. After the fluctuation was released, the star that was about to collide with Shangguan Qing'er strangely avoided it. The mysteries of the movement of the stars seemed to be affected by the power, hidden in the wooden puppet. Seizing the opportunity, Shangguan Qing'er flew into the depths of the formation. Just as she approached the center of the array formation suddenly trembled. The sun, moon, and stars rotated rapidly, as if the stars were moving. Shangguan Qing'er, who was clearly near the center of the formation, was suddenly transferred back to the top of the stairs. After failing again, Shangguan Qing'er was flustered and exasperated. Damn it, how can there be such a formation? Anyone who tried repeatedly would fail on the verge of success. Everyone failed one after another, and they almost lost all hope in this array formation. Right at that moment, 3 ear-rending sounds could be heard flying down from above. They were by Yi Jian and his son Bai Zhe, who had sensed the commotion at the bottom of the stairs. Behind them was a woman, Sheng Xuelian. Don't waste your energy. In the center of the wisest galaxy formation, there is a talisman left behind by an all-creation's old monster. If a person of the fairy realm tries to barge in, he or she will be transported back. If it were possible, I would have passed through the formation long ago. Hearing this, Su Yu's gaze shifted. This must be the reason why Bai Jian was willing to open up the final legacy of the materials. He could not enter the final place by himself. Hearing this, Shangguan Qing'er turned around and asked, "Are you saying that I can't enter?" Bai Jian smiled. "If the fairy realm could enter, I would not have allowed outsiders like you to share the legacy of the materials with us, the descendants of the guards." He did not hide his intentions at all. Shangguan Qing'er did not find it strange. Instead, she felt relieved. The indignant look on her face was replaced by a sense of relief. Her body flashed, and she moved to the side, closing her eyes to rest. Bai Jian's expression was a little gloomy. "What do you plan to do?" Shangguan Qing'er smiled sweetly. "Of course I plan to do the same thing as you." Without a doubt, the two of them, who were both fairy realm experts, had the same idea: to plunder. They would allow the half-fairies to enter to search for the legacy of the materials, while the two of them would wait outside. As long as they searched the bodies of the people who came out, they would be able to plunder all of their belongings. Su Yu calmly looked at the two of them, while the Ghost King let out a vague, cold laugh. Zhou Jin's face fell. This formation was left behind by an all-creation's old man, and it is called the wisest galaxy formation. The formation contains the old man's understanding of the divine decree. Once you enter it, it is equivalent to entering his divine decree. If you're unable to break free from the attacks of his divine decree, you will never be able to enter the center of the formation. The center of the formation is the last secret place that leads to the legacy of the materials. There are also the two most important materials there. Whoever is lucky enough to obtain them will be the one who is blessed. Bai Jian smiled. However, his smile was laced with an undetectable coldness. It was obvious that he would not allow anyone to snatch away the materials that belonged to him. However, the people present did not reveal the fact that the real spirit was in the center of the formation. The Ghost King calmly said, "After saying so much, you still do not understand how we are supposed to enter the center of the formation." Bai Jian smiled. "It is very simple. Try countless times. This formation has existed for a very long time. The symbols in the center have also aged. Hence, there will occasionally be a flaw. Whether or not you can find the flaw and enter the center of the formation depends on your abilities." Bai Jian was implying that they should keep trying and wait for an opportunity to appear. Then he calmly said, "Of course, if you can resist the divine decree within, you will also be able to enter the center." Zhou Jin coldly grunted. "Resist the divine decree of an all-creation's old monster? Even a divine master might not be able to do that." Knowing that the only way to enter the formation was through the stupidest method, how could anyone be in a good mood? Bai Jian's smile remained the same. I advise you to quickly prepare yourself. This flaw appears once every 6 hours. It looks like it will appear within the next 2 hours. If you miss it, you will have to wait for another 6 hours. Su Yu's eyes glowed. Resist the divine decree? Deep within his pupils, a hint of a smile appeared. Chapter 547. As Bai Jian spoke, he pushed the two people who were standing behind him forward. They were his son, Baizhi, and Shang Xuelian. Shang Xuelian had also successfully passed through the stone statue forest. This was unexpected. As far as he could remember, this woman only had the cultivation of one vital energy crystal. She was even weaker than Zhang Zhijing, who had barely made it through. It was truly a surprise that she had been able to pass through. Bai Qi and Zhou Jin also noticed Shang Xuelian's presence and frowned slightly. They were also surprised that Shang Xuelian had also made it through safely. The two of you should get ready as well. Whoever can withstand the divine decree left behind by the All Creation's old monster for a long time will have a higher chance of reaching the center of the spell formation first. You both know how much of an opportunity you will get. All right, I won't say any more. Let's go. Bai Yijian waved his sleeves, and Baizhi, who was behind him, entered the Ruin River formation first. Unlike Zhou Jin, Baizhi's situation was very different when he entered the Milky Way formation. Baizhi's body was much slower under the influence of the divine decree. However, the difference was that when the first meteorite came crashing down, Baizhi was able to dodge it easily. This was something that Zhou Jin could never achieve. Seeing this, Zhou Jin secretly clenched his fists, feeling embarrassed. Others could do the same thing, but he could not. Soon after, the second meteorite came crashing down. Baizhi closed his eyes, not intending to resist the power of the stars. Instead, he closed his eyes and slowly released a mysterious rhythm. It might have been unfamiliar to others, but it was very familiar to Su Yu and Xia Jingyu. The divine decree, and it's of the divine grade. Su Yu was slightly surprised. He did not expect that there would be someone else besides him and Xia Jingyu who had cultivated the divine decree to such a level. According to Yunyazi, most people did not understand the use of the divine decree in the future. It was the key to determining whether a person could reach a higher level. However, after thinking about it, Bai Yijian was the descendant of Tianjizi's disciple. Perhaps he understood the significance of the divine decree. Within the spell, Baizhi consecutively passed through 2 star orbits. Bai Yijian nodded in satisfaction. Not bad. Shang Wanqinger leaned against the stone wall calmly and said disapprovingly, in order to enter the Milky Way and collect the materials that you need, the entire clan of the Guardians is trying to comprehend the divine decree left behind by that all creation's old monster. I think that even a pig would have some achievements. What's the big deal about passing through 2 paths? It won't be too late to talk about it after he passes through the 5th path. Bai Yijian did not speak. He looked at Baizhi helplessly, but at the same time, his eyes were filled with anticipation. How could Baizhi, who was in the formation, not hear Shangwan Qinger's indifferent tone? He could not help but feel angry, and he unleashed his divine decree in one breath. At this time, he had entered the 3rd star trajectory. Compared to the previous 2 times, he was clearly straining, and his expression was replaced with caution and seriousness. The mysterious divine will release from his body became more and more intense, but his figure was not as natural and easy as before. Bang! A star almost brushed past his thigh. He had barely managed to avoid the attack. Before Baizhi could heave a sigh of relief, the star from the 4th path crashed into him. Baizhi's expression changed, and he hurriedly used his own divine decree to resist the descent of the divine decree. Bang! This time, although he tried his best to avoid it, the star still crashed into his calf. His figure suddenly became messy, and he found it difficult to control his body. Right at this moment, the star from the 5th path crashed into him naturally. Baizhi was knocked back without any complaints. At the same time, the stars from the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd paths also crashed into him naturally. After 5 consecutive collisions, Baizhi was knocked back. Although the wisest Milky Way formation was powerful, its original purpose was to prevent people from entering, not to harm them. Hence, although it seemed like the collisions were continuous, the people who entered were knocked back, and they did not cause much harm. However, for those who were extremely prideful, such a sorry state was unbearable for them. Baizhi's face was gloomy, and he looked extremely annoyed. He crawled out of the Milky Way formation and went ashore. Su Yu turned around and said to Xia Jingyu, "Let's give it a try." Xia Jingyu was eager to give it a try, but there was a hint of fear in her beautiful eyes. It was obvious that she had suffered some losses in this formation before. When they went down, Baizha crawled back up in a sorry state. Baizha felt that everyone present was watching him make a fool of himself, and he could vaguely hear many people gloating over his misfortune. This was especially so for Shangwan Qing'er, who did not even try to hide the look in her eyes. This made Baizha, who was already embarrassed, feel even more humiliated. At this moment, as he brushed past Su Yu and Xia Jingyu, he also sensed that Su Yu seemed to be mocking him. This made Baizha angry. If it was Shangwan Qing'er, he would not dare to say anything. However, Su Yu, a mere human king, dared to mock him. He really did not know what was good for him. Stop right there. Baizha's face immediately turned cold, and he coldly shouted, blocking their path. Su Yu was stunned, and he frowned slightly. What? Do you have any advice for me? Humph. Do you think you are worthy of mocking me? Baizha's face turned cold. I look down on weaklings like you who are inferior to others and take pleasure in others' misfortune the most. Your weak cultivation can be remedied, and I will not look down on you. However, you are a weakling from the bottom of your heart, and I really look down on people like you. Su Yu and Xia Jingyu were stunned. They did not look like they were mocking Baizha at all. In fact, as divine decree cultivators, they had even praised Baizha's divine decree. Su Yu was stunned for a moment, but he quickly realized what was going on. He was not mocking Baizha, but Baizha himself had lost face, and he wanted to redeem himself by reprimanding Su Yu. In terms of disdain, Shangwan Qing'er was naked. 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 He did not dare to look for Shangwan Qing'er to mock him, so he could only look for someone like Su Yu, who was easy to bully. After all, Su Yu is only a human king, so he was easy to deal with. Under normal circumstances, Su Yu could not be bothered with such a person. However, they were about to enter the Milky Way formation to search for the final place of legacy. If he left the impression that he was easy to bully, he would be in trouble once they entered. He had no choice but to teach Baizha an unforgettable lesson. Are you very strong? How strong are you? Are you stronger than the fairy realm? Su Yu asked. You grew up in the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, and yet you have not broken through to the fairy realm. Don't you think you are useless? The mysterious heavenly divine pavilion was many times more abundant than the outside world. Jiuzhou did not know, but the thin spiritual energy in the Jinlong continent was not even a fifth of the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion. If Su Yu had grown up in such an environment, he might have broken through to the fairy realm long ago. Chapter 548. As for Bai Yijian, he was deep in thought for a moment. His eyes were filled with worry. In his opinion, Su Yu was right. Even though the descendants of the guards had such an excellent land filled with resources, the probability of them breaking through to the fairy realm was so low. It was obvious that their descendants' cultivation talents were getting worse with each generation. Although there was the restriction of not being able to leave the 5 mountains, which led to their lack of experience, overall, they were indeed not as good as the people of the outside world in terms of cultivation. Little brother, before talking about others, it's best to weigh yourself first. Bai Yijian's expression was calm. He naturally had to speak up for his son, even though he knew that the other party was right. What he was implying was that Su Yu's abilities were inferior to others. So how could he have the face to teach others the lesson? Su Yu shook his head. I have never thought that I would be weaker than someone who needs to step on the weak to increase his prestige. Baizha raised his eyebrows, and his eyes flickered with surprise. Su Yu actually dared to challenge him. This was unexpected. Are you saying that you are very strong? Baizha's eyes turned cold, and a fierce light flashed in his eyes. Su Yu nodded calmly. Yes, not bad. I should be stronger than you. Is that so? Baizha's whole body emitted a dangerous aura as he stared at Su Yu. Suddenly, he flicked his sleeve and threw out a bone spear that was shrouded in true energy. It was unknown what the bone spur was refined from, but it was extremely cold and gave people a shivering feeling. When he threw it out, Su Yu and Xia Jingyu felt a gloomy and cold sensation. Su Yu also felt a bloody aura from it. Moreover, it was a fresh smell of blood. He had killed a lot of people, not just 1 or 2. Oof. Su Yu coldly snorted. Facing the sinister bone spur, he did not retreat. Instead, he advanced forward. A small golden sword was spinning in his palm. With a flash of golden light, the small sword disappeared from the air at the same time. When it reappeared, it was already right next to Baija's neck. With a spin, it was about to slice off Baija's neck. Baija was indeed a great circle half immortal expert. His reaction was extremely fast. The moment the small golden sword disappeared, he realized that something was wrong. As he retreated, he took out a jade pendant from his sleeve. The jade pendant exuded a gentle aura. Milk! The white energy was like water ripples, flowing on the surface of her fair body. The small golden sword slashed down. Milk! On the other hand, the white energy seemed to have fallen into mud, and its speed immediately slowed down. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Baishi continuously retreated, avoiding this extremely dangerous teleportation sword. Semi-manufactured spiritual weapon? I've really underestimated you. Now that Baija's plan had failed, he became even more humiliated. His face was contorted in anger, and it was as if Su Yu was the one who had caused him to suffer losses in the wisest Milky Way formation. Su Yu said expressionlessly, "This is your so-called ability? It doesn't seem like much. How dare you pretend to be profound with such insignificant skills? Aren't you afraid of laughing your head off?" Baija snorted coldly. "Take this." However, Su Yu, who was opposite him, looked relaxed. He wasn't in a hurry to attack. Instead, he shook his head in disappointment and said, "You misunderstood me. What I meant was, how could you lose so quickly?" Lost. Baija was stunned for a moment before he felt a slight chill on the back of his neck. He reached behind him and felt a sticky sensation on his palm. Baija's pupils shrank when he looked at his hands. His hands were covered in blood. The skin on the back of his neck had been sliced open, and there was a line of blood flowing from it. Baija's heart skipped a beat, and his pupils shrank. When did this happen? When did someone cut open his back? Although it was only a layer of skin, it was obvious that Su Yu had been merciful. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been difficult for such a stealthy sword to slice off his entire neck. The people who were watching the battle looked at Su Yu with a hint of fear in their eyes. In their eyes, Su Yu had actually taken out two identical golden swords. One of them had attacked Baija from the front, distracting him, while the second one had silently appeared behind him. Who would have thought that a mere human king would possess two sets of weapons? Moreover, both of them were so powerful. If they had been as careless as Baija, they might have really died at Su Yu's hands. Swoosh! Su Yu raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. Then, two streaks of golden light appeared in his palm. Looking at Su Yu casually sheathing his sword, Baija was both embarrassed and angry. He looked like he had just won the battle. He had wanted to teach someone a lesson, but in the end, someone else had taught him a lesson and spared his life. How humiliating was that? Su Yu sheathed his golden swords and did not say anything. Instead, he said to Xia Jingyu, "Let's go in." After saying this, he turned and stepped into the Milky Way. However, at that moment, Baija struggled for a moment. His expression was replaced by a ferocious expression, and a cold, murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Swoosh! The moment Su Yu stepped into the Milky Way, Baija, who was standing with his back to them, suddenly had a vicious look in his eyes. Then, a mass of gray air shot out of his eyes towards Su Yu and Xia Jingyu. This gray stream of air did not have a physical body. It was something that existed on a spiritual level. It was similar to a soul, but different at the same time. It was the divine decree. The divine decree was the embodiment of a person's inner feelings. Baija's personality was evil, so the divine decree was very cold and made people feel uncomfortable. Even a slight contact with it would cause their souls to feel pain. The gray stream of air, which was like a river, surged towards the defenseless Su Yu and Xia Jingyu. Shangguan Qinger's expression changed. How could she have expected Baija to launch a sneak attack? Su Yu had clearly spared his life. However, Baija's attack had been too sudden. Apart from Bai Yijian, who was standing nearby, no one else could have intervened in time. However, after Bai Yijian furrowed his brows, his body did not move. He did not try to stop Baija. Seeing that Suyu and Xiaojingyu were about to launch a sneak attack, Suyu coldly snorted as if he had eyes on the back of his head. I knew you would have this trick up your sleeve. Eat my divine decree as well. Suyu coldly snorted. Two beams of purple and white light shot out from his eyes. It was the state of a divine grade divine decree. The beam of light shot out immediately, piercing through the gray stream of air. Although they were both divine decrees, Suyu had already reached the level of pure divine decree, which was much more solid than Baijian's. The gray stream of air was instantly pierced through, then dispersed. The beam of divine decree, which had been formed by the fusion of thunder and flames, struck towards Baizhi. How could Baizhi have expected that Suyu would be able to directly destroy his divine decree when he had clearly launched a sneak attack on Suyu? He had no time to defend himself against such a counterattack. Crack! Just as the beam of light was about to pierce through Baizhi's body, a large hand reached out from the side and crushed the beam of light. Chapter 549. At the critical moment, Baijian had made his move and crushed the beam of light formed by the divine decree. Suyu was not surprised that he had made his move. If he had just watched his son get killed, Suyu would have been surprised. What surprised him was Baijian's divine decree. Crushing the divine decree with his bare hands was not something that could be done by someone with a high cultivation level. Only someone with a high-level divine decree would be able to do so. Baijian's divine decree was most likely above divine grade. Suyu wondered if he had broken through to the pure realm like Suyu. However, after thinking about it, Suyu rejected this conjecture. If Baijian had the pure divine decree, he would not have been blocked by the divine decree left behind by Tianjizi. Although Tianjizi's cultivation level was high, the divine decree left behind by Tianjizi was not to be underestimated. However, Suyu had witnessed Tianjizi's remnant while being destroyed. Even his remnant's soul could not withstand the baptism of time, let alone the divine decree left behind. If he had guessed correctly, the divine decree within the wisest Milky Way formation was not as strong as it had been in the past. It was getting weaker with each generation, and now it was only slightly stronger than a divine-grade divine decree. Baijian's divine decree was not as strong as the one here. If I did not use my full strength, I'm afraid you would have watched as your son ambushed me and killed me, right? Suyu asked calmly. From the beginning to the end, his son had provoked him for no reason, and Suyu had spared his life. However, his son did not know what was good for him and dared to ambush Suyu. Throughout the entire process, Baijian, who had the best chance of stopping Suyu, had remained calm and collected. It was only when the situation had changed beyond his expectations, that his son had met with an accident and was about to be killed, that Baijian stood up with a look of blame. If it had been someone with a normal cultivation level, he would have been killed by his son's sneak attack. He did not reflect on his actions, nor did he feel any shame. Instead, he had shamelessly blamed Suyu. Baijian's eyes gradually turned cold. Young man, even if my son was in the wrong, why did you use such a heavy hand? What do you want to say? Just say it. Suyu did not answer, but instead said expressionlessly. He did not believe that someone who had lived for such a long time and was the leader of a bloodline would be so lacking in shrewdness as to do such a thing in public. From his previous performance, it was clear that Baijian was not such a stupid person. Hearing this, Baijian, who had a cold expression on his face, had a flash of surprise in his eyes. He looked at Suyu's deep eyes and was secretly surprised. The expression on Baijian's face changed, and the cold expression on his face gradually disappeared. He stared at Suyu for a long time before letting out a soft breath. Let's put this matter aside for now. However, after this, I will need you to give me an explanation. Explanation? Shangguan Qing'er, the Ghost King, Zhou Jin, and the others rolled their eyes. Could there be some sort of connection between Suyu and Baijian? Oh, Suyu raised his brows slightly. An explanation? Your Excellency, how did you manage to break through to the one crystal half-fairy level? I believe you're well aware of it. As the guardian of this place and the descendant of that elder, I must confirm it for you. Baijian stared at Suyu. Suyu sighed in his heart. So, Bai Yijian still managed to detect it in the end. Although he had tried his best to hide the fact that he had used the Milky Way Star's Emperor Beisan artifact, he had managed to hide it from Shangguan Qing'er, who had mistaken him for an ancient bloodline. However, he could not hide it from Bai Yijian, who was familiar with this place. What could have allowed a pool of spiritual liquid to push a human king to the level of half-fairy? Apart from the 10% of spiritual stones that were mixed with impurities, there was nothing else. As the descendant of Tianjizi's disciple, he was most likely to know about the treasures that were mixed with the impurities. Hence, when Suyu had fought with Bai Zhe and revealed his cultivation level, Bai Yijian had discovered it. However, he did not do anything about it. Instead, he played along and prepared to take the opportunity to attack Suyu and subdue him. This was why Bai Yijian was acting so strangely. However, why should Suyu give him an explanation? Haha, what if I say no? Suyu said coldly. In Tianjizi's last words, the three disciples, as well as their descendants, had guarded the 5 paths of legacy for generations to come until it was taken away by someone else. However, when it came to their generation, Bai Yijian had stolen the 5 paths of legacy. Not only did he steal the various legacies, but he also set up many dangers to trap and kill those who came to train. Now, he had the audacity to claim to be the descendant of Tianjizi's disciple and asked to inspect Suyu. Do you think you have a choice? Bai Yijian said calmly, as if he was certain that Suyu would win. I'm afraid it is not up to you. When we come out of the legacy, I will personally inspect you. After saying this, he waved his sleeves, gesturing to the crowd. Let's move quickly. Whether or not you can enter the legacy will depend on your own luck. After saying this, he closed his eyes and rested, waiting leisurely. Suyu's eyes narrowed, a cold smile flashing in his eyes. It was as if Bai Yijian felt that everything was under his control and that he would definitely be able to defeat Suyu. Suyu's eyes flashed with a cold light. He calmly looked at Bai Zhe, who was still in a state of shock. He then nonchalantly looked away. Although Suyu did not say a word, the look of disregard in his eyes made Bai Zhe feel even worse. He thought that he was stronger than Suyu, but in reality, Suyu had an absolute advantage over him. Zhou Jin was feeling the same way as Bai Zhe. Suyu was much stronger than he had expected. Could it be that after breaking through to half-fairy, Suyu's combat power had increased to such an extent? He did not think that he was much stronger than Bai Zhe. Zhou Jin was shocked. Swoosh! Suyu ignored the gazes around him and stepped into the wisest Milky Way formation with Xia Jingyu. Bai Qi and Zhou Jin did not dare delay, and they entered the formation once again. Bai Zhe stared at Suyu's back, his eyes flickering. He clenched his teeth and chased after them. As soon as he entered, Suyu felt as if he had entered another time flow. He did not feel any suppression, but his speed was inexplicably slow. It was as if he had entered a space where time had slowed down. Unknowingly, Suyu could sense the existence of a faintly discernible, vast divine decree. Under the influence of this divine decree, everything in the world moved according to its trajectory. The sun, moon, stars, intruders, time. Everything was controlled by the divine decree. Hence, unless one could resist the divine decree, anyone who entered would be sent out by the trajectory the divine decree had arranged for them. Tianjizi's divine decree is the trajectory. Suyu murmured. His and Xia Jingyu's divine decree was derived from nature. It was the nature divine decree. The divine decree before them was the trajectory, which allowed everything in the universe to follow its trajectory. Such a mysterious divine decree made Suyu gasp in amazement. With a thought, Suyu and Xia Jingyu released their divine-grade divine decrees at the same time. Suyu's divine-grade holy decree was of nature. The divine decree of thunder and ice surrounded his body, forming a halo that was difficult to see with the naked eye. Under this halo, Suyu could clearly feel a sense of disharmony within the Milky Way formation. This was due to the divine decree being affected, and the trajectory had changed. However, the divine decree in this place was unusually strong. After the trajectory had deviated, it took on another trajectory and enveloped Suyu and the others. Chapter 550. Baija had used his own divine will to forcefully influence the trajectory of the star's trajectory, but he still couldn't escape from the entire divine will. Therefore, although it looked like he had passed through a few stars, he had been driven out of the trajectory and had long since been fixed. Thinking back, Suyu was secretly surprised. This divine decree actually had a hint of destiny in it. As long as one was in the trajectory, one's destiny was already determined. As expected of Senior Tianjizi, even after falling for so many years, the remnants of his divine decree still have such a shocking and mysterious rhythm. Suyu's eyes were filled with admiration as he realized something. At that moment, the Ghost King and Zhou Jin were in the same situation. They could not go far at all before being knocked back by the stars. This happened 3 times, but they still could not get any closer. Although Bai Zhe was much better off than them, he could not escape the trajectory and was eventually knocked back. At that moment, a star followed the trajectory and crashed into Suyu and the others. According to the original trajectory, the 2 of them would have been knocked back as well. However, Suyu and Xia Jingyu were not ordinary people. The 2 of them displayed their divine decrees at the same time. Suyu's divine decree of ice and thunder, and Xia Jingyu's divine decree of water. When the 2 divine-grade divine decrees appeared, their trajectories became chaotic. The star that was crashing towards them deviated slightly and brushed past them. "Brother Yu, there seems to be something on the star," Xia Jingyu said, softly all of a sudden. Suyu looked over and saw that there seemed to be a black box embedded in the star. Before this, he had not had the time to pay attention to the star, as his attention had been focused on the entire formation. Now that he was close enough, he had accidentally discovered the existence of the black iron box. Suyu raised his hand, and a palm appeared in the air, sucking the black iron box down from the star. He found that the box was empty, and there were only remnants of crafting materials. Suyu's eyes flashed as he scanned the surroundings, taking in all the stars into his soul eyes. His eyes were filled with shock. With his transparent eyes, Suyu discovered that the black iron box on this star wasn't just a coincidence. Instead, it existed on every single star. Most of them were empty, and only the black iron boxes near the central area contained items. They were all materials that Suyu could not name, but were full of spirituality. After thinking for a moment, Suyu's eyes shone brightly. He looked at Bai Yijian and said, "Hee, are you still trying to hide it now? Brother Yu, what's wrong?" Xia Jingyu's long eyelashes fluttered as she asked in confusion. Suyu said with a faint smile, "I was careless and only realized it now. I was almost deceived by them." Looking at Xia Jingyu's confused face, Suyu said softly, "Actually, we are currently in the legacy of materials." Hearing this, Xia Jingyu was taken aback. However, as smart as she was, she immediately looked at the black metal chest beneath her feet. She asked in bewilderment, "Brother Yu, are you saying—" "That's right, every star in the formation has a black metal box, which contains the materials for the succession. We were in the inheritance, but we didn't know anything. If it wasn't for you, Jingyu, I wouldn't have guessed it either." Xia Jingyu's eyes were filled with shock. "You mean to say that this place is the inheritance of materials, but he tricked us to another place? If that's the case, where's the other inheritance ground?" The 2 of them sensed that something was amiss. It seemed like Bai Yijian was hiding a deep secret. Suyu shook his head. "I don't know, but it's definitely not the last inheritance that he mentioned. We have to be careful." At that moment, another star came crashing down. Suyu and Xia Jingyu released their divine decree once again, narrowly avoiding it. After 4 consecutive attempts, they finally passed through half of the formation and arrived at the place where Baija had been before. This scene caused by Qi and Zhou Jinman, who had yet to advance even half an inch, to feel their expressions turn gloomy. Bai Yijian's eyes shone brightly as he said in surprise, "Oh, in this era, there are still humans who are willing to cultivate the divine decree? In a world where martial arts were the most important, the divine decree was rarely valued. Firstly, it was extremely difficult to comprehend, as it required too much energy and time. Apart from the long-lived all creations, old monsters, Ordinary martial artists were not willing to spend their time on the divine decree. Secondly, the rewards were not proportional to the effort. Spending an endless amount of time to comprehend the divine decree would result in a limited amount of power. At least, no one had ever heard of a strong martial artist who was famous for his divine decree. Even for the descendants of the guards, the purpose of cultivating the divine decree was to enter the wisest Milky Way formation and collect the materials on the stars. There was almost no one who could comprehend the divine decree on their own. However, the two young people before him were so strange. Not only did they comprehend it, but they also had great attainments. Baijia's divine decree was built on the descendants of the guardians, and it was only because of his many years of experience in comprehending the divine decree. However, Su Yu and Xia Jingyu obviously did not have such a background. What he did not know was that Xia Jingyu's level of comprehension was extraordinary, and she was not human. As for Su Yu, he relied on the divine nine-dragon cauldron, which allowed him to spend a lot of time on comprehension. Otherwise, Su Yu would not have chosen the path of the divine decree. However, their divine decree is on par with yours. The fifth track should be their track. Bai Yijian muttered to himself. However, before he could finish his sentence, he stopped abruptly. Bai Yijian's expression froze, and a look of shock appeared on his face. Just as they were about to be smashed by the star, Su Yu and Xia Jingyu suddenly increased their speed by twofold, forcefully breaking away from the tracks and successfully stepping into the sixth track. Shangguan Qing'er, who had a tranquil expression, finally had a change in her eyes. Suspicion flickered in her eyes. Power of time. Could it be that this is also his ancient bloodline? This was indeed the power of time from the divine nine-dragon cauldron. Previously, under the influence of the wisest Milky Way formation, his eyes had recovered a little, allowing him to release the pupil technique that had been suppressed for a long time. He could have instantly sped up the space-time around him by 3 times, but now he was limited to a single time. The power of time? This lad is very strange. However, he barely managed to dodge it just now, and I'm afraid it will be impossible for him to do so again. The divine decree gets stronger the further he goes, and the sixth track is most likely his limit. Bai Yijian, who was very familiar with this place, was not optimistic about Su Yu's chances. At that moment, the star on the sixth track came crashing towards them. Su Yu and Xia Jingyu's expressions changed slightly. Without hesitation, Su Yu once again used the power of time to double his speed. However, just as they were about to charge through it, something strange happened. The star on the last 5 tracks suddenly teleported to all 4 sides of Su Yu, sandwiching them in the middle. Such a method of breaking away from the tracks was unexpected. The last track is the sum of all the tracks in front of it, and each one is stronger than the last. Apart from the occasional weak flaw, no one can rely on their own divine decree to charge through the formation. By Yijian's side, it's a pity that it was not easy to charge through the 6th track. Chapter 551. Shangguan Qing'er stared at Su Yu, her eyes filled with disbelief. Su Yu, who was surrounded by many stars, suddenly shot out a beam of divine light from his eyes. The divine light was like the eye of the heavens, overlooking all living things and controlling their life and death. It was a majesty that could not be looked at directly and could not be defied. It was like the heavens. Shangguan Qing'er suddenly had an illusion that it was not the majesty of a human, but the majesty of the heavens, the unfathomable majesty of the heavens. Wherever the divine light of the heavens passed, the stars were thrown into chaos and their trajectories collapsed. It was not just the 6th trajectory. The 7th, 8th, 9th, all the stars in the sky, all the Milky Way were all thrown into chaos. The Ghost King, Zhou Jin, and Bai Zhe, who were persevering in the Milky Way, were caught off guard and pulled into the Milky Way. Puff! Zhou Jin was the unluckiest. Everything had happened so suddenly, and he had just entered the 3rd trajectory, brushing past a star. Unexpectedly, the star suddenly rolled backwards. It was not as it had been before, but instead crashed into it with the force of a raging wave. Under the terrifying force, his protective vital energy was shattered on the spot. His chest was flattened, and his broken ribs pierced through his flesh. His body was knocked into the depths of the Milky Way, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. The Ghost King and Baja's expressions changed drastically as they looked at the Milky Way that was crazily rolling backwards. They were on the periphery where there were fewer stars. Although they had been pulled into the Milky Way, they could still see the overall situation of the entire Milky Way. After taking a closer look, the two of them revealed looks of horror at the same time. The entire Milky Way was in the shape of a whirlpool, rolling continuously. In the center of the whirlpool, a silver-haired young man was holding a woman's hand, standing quietly. All the stars were revolving around him, as if he was the king of this place. Under their shocked gazes, Suyu calmly took a step forward while holding Xia Jingyu's hand. As he took a step forward, the entire Milky Way shook violently. The huge, turbulent whirlpool moved forward along with his step. To be precise, the place under his feet was the center of the Milky Way. Just like that, under their shocked gazes, Suyu stepped on the Milky Way and walked deeper into it. Within a few breaths, he had appeared in the center of the Milky Way, where the 9th trajectory was. Baijin's expression was unprecedentedly serious as he looked at the silver-haired young man in disbelief. The pure divine decree. He's only 17. Is that even possible? Shangwan Qing'er's eyes were filled with splendor. For the first time, she felt that Su Yu's back was exceptionally tall. Even in the 18 blessed and heavenly lands, only those old monsters who had lived for countless years could grasp the pure divine decree. They had a lot of time to comprehend it. It was inconceivable that such a divine would appear on a 17-year-old youth. Shangwan Qing'er was shocked, and she could not help but sink into deep thought. What kind of ancient bloodline does he have? Absorbing impurities, controlling time, and now the pure divine decree. For the first time, Shangwan Qing'er began to doubt Su Yu's identity as someone with the ancient bloodline. It wasn't that his ancient bloodline was too weak, but rather that his various abilities were too powerful. It didn't seem like an ancient bloodline at all. What Su Yu used was the heavenly eyes that he had condensed. Although he had only released a tiny bit of it, compared to the track divine decree that had lost its master, Su Yu was still a notch above it. Under the absolute suppression, trajectory's divine decree naturally collapsed. Xia Jingyu followed behind Su Yu quietly, a faint smile on her face. It seemed that from a moment they had met, Su Yu had always been her strongest shield, always resolving her crises and shielding her from a storm. From a beginning to the end, no matter how strong she became, this man would always be stronger than her. In this world, it seemed that only this man could give her a sense of security and peace. The two of them stood in the center of the Milky Way. Su Yu stopped in his tracks and looked at Xia Jingyu, who was smiling inexplicably. What's so funny? I thought you would be surprised. In terms of comprehension, Su Yu only surpassed Xia Jingyu in the aspect of the divine decree. Hearing this, Xia Jingyu smiled like a flower. I won't be surprised no matter what level Brother Yu's training has reached, because you are Su Yu. Is it because he is Su Yu? Xia Jingyu trusted Su Yu very much. Su Yu smiled and focused his attention on the center of the Milky Way. Thousands of Milky Ways swirled in reverse. Only a star with a diameter of 1,000 feet stood in front of him, unmoving. This Milky Way was a mysterious place that the descendants of the guards had never set foot in. For generations, they had only been able to step into the 8th trajectory. They had never been able to break through the 9th trajectory. Jingyu, what did the real spirit look like? Su Yu's soul eyes scanned the star and asked in surprise. Xia Jingyu shook her head slightly. I don't know. It was too fast. We didn't see it clearly. Only Shangwan Qing'er confirmed that it was the real spirit and subconsciously shouted. Only then did we know that it was the real spirit that attacked you. Is that so? Su Yu touched his chin, a strange look on his face. Brother Yu, did you find a real spirit? Xia Jingyu's eyes were filled with excitement. Su Yu shook his head thoughtfully. That's the strange thing. You all saw the real spirit escape into the Milky Way, but there was no living creature here. How could that be? Xia Jingyu frowned. It shouldn't be. It's fine if I was the only one who saw it wrongly, but not everyone saw it wrongly. It really did hide in the center of the Milky Way. Could it be that it was proficient in space escape techniques and could escape from all of us? Xia Jingyu couldn't understand it, and her heart was filled with disappointment. However, Suyu didn't look disappointed. Instead, he looked excited. We didn't come here in vain. The value of the materials left behind on this star is immeasurable. With a swoosh, Suyu pulled Xia Jingyu and landed on the star. The star was unknown, but it was terrifyingly hard. When Suyu and Xia Jingyu stepped on it, there wasn't even the slightest vibration. It was obvious that the star was extremely dense. However, he didn't have the time to study this strange star. Instead, he moved in front of a stone platform on the star. The stone platform was covered in dust, and many parts of it had fallen off. However, there were 3 black iron boxes on the stone platform, shining with a black light. Every mouthful was brand new, without a speck of dust, unaffected by the dust at all. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the black iron boxes were emitting a layer of black light that kept the dust away. So he wasn't unfamiliar with these black boxes. There was a black iron box at the bottom of the lava pool where the crafting legacy was located. Suyu had obtained a mysterious heavenly crafting technique from it, as well as a fairy-level cultivation technique, the Great Sun Punishment Fairy Picture. Moreover, the black iron box itself was an extremely rare treasure, and the items stored within it were even more precious. The one in the middle contains the thunder attribute, so it belongs to me. You can choose one of the remaining 2, and we'll split the last one equally. Suyu's eyes were filled with excitement. His soul eyes couldn't see through the black box, but the prototype fairy artifact, the 5-elemental strong thunder seal, could sense it. The 5-elemental strong thunder seal could only sense one thing, and that was disastrous thunder. The 5-elemental strong thunder seal would become more powerful after absorbing disastrous thunder. Shockingly, this black box contained tribulation lightning. Moreover, since it was left behind by Tianjizi and placed on the last star, it must be an extraordinary item. I'll listen to Brother Yu. Xia Jingyu's beautiful eyes were filled with splendor. She had only managed to reach this place because of Suyu, so she was only grateful that she could split it equally. Suyu wanted to suck the black box away so that he could open it when he had the time. However, he found that the black box was extremely heavy, much heavier than the black box at the bottom of the lava pool. He couldn't store it in his ring. As such, he could only open it on the spot. They were not far from the shore, so if they looked carefully, they could still see what was inside the box. This was something that Suyu didn't want to see. With a thought, Suyu carefully used his spirit energy to strike the black iron box's buckle. Crack! With a crisp sound, the black iron box opened. The moment it opened, a black bolt of lightning suddenly shot out, heading straight for Suyu. It was actually black lightning, which was rare. The black lightning was different from normal lightning. After it appeared, it was silent, and there was no sound of thunder. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was normal light, as it didn't look like lightning at all. However, Suyu felt a chill run down his spine, and his heart was beating wildly. At that moment, Suyu felt like he was a candle flickering in the wind, about to be extinguished at the next moment. Sensing that Suyu and the other 2 were trying to obtain the legacy of this place, Bai Yijian and Shangguan Qingyer's gazes turned serious, filled with anticipation. After the black lightning appeared, the 2 of them looked as if they had seen a terrifying demon. Their expressions changed drastically, and without thinking, they retreated frantically. Shangguan Qing'er exclaimed in shock, the black heavenly thunder that only appears when an all-creation old monster passes the ordeal. There was surprise in her tone, but there was also an indescribable fear and dread. It's actually this kind of lightning? So he was also shocked. The origin of the black lightning was frighteningly powerful. Without thinking, Suyu tilted his shoulder and dodged to the side as he was prepared. The lightning passed by 30 feet away, brushing past him. Then, a scene that made everyone's scalps go numb appeared. The black lightning shot into the distance, and along the way, all the lightning that came into contact with it turned into black dust and drifted away. How hard were the stars in this place? Even the Guardian clan had not been able to destroy a single one of them after hundreds of years. However, this wisp of black lightning easily turned it into dust. Seeing this scene, everyone gasped in shock. This black heavenly thunder had been released unconsciously. If it had been used to attack people, who would not have been turned into dust? Everyone was shocked, and they quickly looked towards the black iron box. All they saw was a circle of black silk threads, as thin as silk, coiled into a ball. The black, disastrous thunder had come from these black silk threads. This is the beast tendon of an all-creation demonic beast that has passed the ordeal. Shangguan Qingyur cried out. Bai Yijian was ecstatic. It's the dragon tendon. It's the dragon tendon of a real spirit dragon. A real spirit dragon? Suyu was secretly shocked. This all-creation senior once traveled with another all-creation's friend, and they found a real spirit dragon's corpse in an ancient ruin. This dragon tendon was obtained from the real spirit dragon's corpse. Bai Yijian was ecstatic. If he had not been concerned about his status, he might have even laughed out loud. Chapter 552. As for the fact that Su Yu had discovered the dragon tendon, he had completely forgotten about it. In his mind, everything found here would belong to him sooner or later. With this dragon tendon, even if Shangguan Qingyur intervened, she would not let Su Yu off. Dragon tendon? Su Yu was secretly shocked. The dragon tendon of an immortal spirit that had passed the tribulation could emit such a terrifying black heavenly thunder? In the Thunder Emperor's 9 books, there was a rumor that a severely injured immortal spirit had easily killed several all-creations. Looking at the dragon tendon, which was as black as silk, Su Yu's eyes burned with passion. This item was priceless. Even in all creations, old monster would be tempted. Su Yu inhaled, and the dragon tendon fell into his palm. It was soft and cool like a woman's hand. It was extremely comfortable and not as terrifying as he had imagined. After all, it had emitted a bit of black heavenly thunder just now. What he did not know was that this dragon tendon had been treated by Tian Jizi. Otherwise, the remnant spiritual pressure of the immortal spirit would have been enough to turn anyone below the divine master level into ashes. As for that bit of black heavenly thunder, it had been sealed for countless years. It had been emitted from the dragon tendon bit by bit, and it had not leaked out all at once. It could be said that the dragon tendon was very safe. Holding the dragon tendon, Su Yu found a feeling of using the entwined dragon silk when he had first entered the martial path. It was a familiar weapon, a familiar feeling. The only difference was that things had changed with the passage of time. Compared to the entwined dragon silk from back then, this was real dragon silk. The only regret was that this item had appeared in front of everyone. If Su Yu entered Jiuzhou one day, he might suffer a disaster for no reason. This was a top-grade material that even an all-creation's old monster could not obtain. This item was troublesome, and Su Yu's heart sank. Brother Xia Jingyu seemed to understand Su Yu's situation. She sighed. Why don't you come with me to see the King of Darkness after we return? He is the only one in the Jinlong continent who can protect us. The King of Darkness was the strongest person in the Jinlong continent, the king who had founded the Empire of Darkness. He was indeed the strongest person in the Jinlong continent. But, unless the king has the cultivation of a divine master, I will have to think of another way, Su Yu said. Xia Jingyu was silent. Indeed, the king of the Jinlong continent could protect them. But in Jiuzhou, which black iron box did you choose? Su Yu asked. After regaining her senses, Xia Jingyu hesitated for a while. She closed her beautiful eyes and quietly sensed her surroundings. After a long while, her gaze landed on the black iron box in her left hand. I'll take this one. Just now, when I was in the stars, I comprehended the trajectory of the divine decree left behind by Senior Wan Xiang. My intuition tells me that this box might be related to the divine decree. Upon hearing this, Su Yu secretly clicked his tongue. Her level of comprehension was still as terrifying as ever. The descendants of the Guardians had guarded this place for countless years. Everyone in the clan had tried to comprehend the divine decree, but no one had ever been able to comprehend the divine decree left behind by the all creation's old monsters. However, Xiaojingyu easily comprehended it. With a light tap of her hand, the black iron chest opened. When it was opened, it didn't create such an exaggerated commotion as Suyu did, and there was only an inconspicuous jade scroll lying quietly inside. Bai Yijian furrowed his brows. The memory jade pendant. Could there be some kind of memory inside? Shangguan Qinger curled her lips and said, "You don't seem to have much luck. You got the least important thing." The jade slip was not as shocking as the dragon tendon. Xia Jingyu held the jade slip in her hand and placed it against her smooth forehead. After a moment, her eyes shone with a look of understanding and joy. She was pleasantly surprised. "Brother Yu, this is the all creation's old man's track divine decree. It is very suitable for me." Xia Jingyu's face was filled with joy. Suyu shrugged his shoulders. This item was indeed more suitable for Xia Jingyu's inhuman level of comprehension than any other treasure. He did not doubt that Xia Jingyu would soon be able to completely control the all creation's old monster's divine decree. "Congratulations, Jingyu." Suyu was sincerely pleased. Xia Jingyu had helped him a lot. Suyu felt much better that she was happy. When she met Suyu's eyes, Xia Jingyu realized that she had lost her composure. Her expression brightened, and she could not help but lower her head. "There is still one last box left. Let's open it together," Suyu said. Xia Jingyu nodded her head happily. She then worked together with Suyu to open the last black iron box. Crack! With a clear and crisp sound, the black iron box was successfully opened. Bai Yijian and Shangguan Qinger looked over and stared at the black iron box without blinking. What would be in the last black iron box? They were not the only ones who were curious and looking forward to it. The Ghost King and Bai Zhe were also staring at the last black iron box. However, the moment the black box was opened, a pink mist suddenly rushed out from within the black iron box. Within the pink mist, a living creature the size of a palm could be vaguely seen. It was wrapped in the mist as it rushed out. Moreover, the moment it rushed out, it flew past Suyu's side. Its shocking speed was close to the speed of light. By the time Suyu realized that something was wrong, the pink living creature had already escaped from his side. His hands were empty. The dragon vein that he had been holding onto had been snatched away. Suyu was shocked. Could it be Bai Yijian was stunned? What kind of living creature is this? Could it be some kind of material? Wait, it's that real spirit. It is actually hiding in the black iron box. Shangguan Qinger let out a delicate cry. Her eyes were filled with astonishment, and she appeared to be extremely excited. No matter how precious the materials here were, how could they compare to a young real spirit? Once it matured, it would be a supreme existence that could easily destroy all creation's old monsters. Real spirit. Bai Yijian sucked in a breath of cold air. Immediately, his eyes shone with a terrifying light. Swoosh! With a flash of his white figure, he ignored the chaotic Milky Way and forcefully barged into it. He then let out a murderous shout. This real spirit belongs to the descendants of the Guardians. Anyone who dares to snatch it will be killed without mercy. The appearance of this thing caused Bai Yijian to completely lose his composure. That was a real spirit, a real spirit. How could he still remain calm? Humph! What a joke. You don't even know whether a real spirit exists. How can you speak for the descendants of the Guardians? I will accept this real spirit on behalf of the Red Blood Palace. Shangguan Qinger coldly snorted and also entered the Milky Way in a flash. You are courting death. Bai Yijian's eyes were cold and filled with murderous intent. He then threw out a beam of light. Shangguan Qinger was not afraid at all. She dealt with it calmly and only chased after him. The two fairy realm experts fought each other, causing the already chaotic stars to become even more chaotic. All the stars in the sky were spinning around chaotically, and there was no trace of the divine decree left. Bai Qi's eyes were filled with shock and excitement. Taking advantage of the chaos in the Milky Way, he rushed towards the real spirit without the suppression of the divine decree of the divine decree. You are also courting death. Bai Yijian's eyes were filled with a cold light. His white robe fluttered as he shouted angrily. His voice contained the great power of a fairy realm expert. Not only was it deafening, but it also shook one's soul, causing it to become numb. Humph! Spiritual objects of the world belong to those who are virtuous. Aren't you being too overbearing? Bai Qi's figure panicked, and his eyes turned cold. Bai Yijian did not even look at him. He only said one word to Bai Qi, "Scram." As he spoke, his speed suddenly increased, and he rushed towards a real spirit. Shangguan Qing'er's face changed. In a moment of desperation, she took out a silver-white chain from her sleeves and wrapped it around Bai Yijian's ankle. With a flick of her wrist, the strange thing was that with this chain, she and Bai Yijian's positions had changed. She arrived at where Bai Yijian was, and Bai Yijian appeared behind her. This chain actually had the ability to change space. Bai Yijian was furious. He took out the long and thin sword from his back and slashed across the air. With a clanging sound, the silver chain was cut in half. A treasure that was no less powerful than a semi-manufactured spiritual artifact had been cut in half just like that. Shangguan Qing'e let out a groan, as if she had been implicated. However, this sacrifice was still worth it. She had caught up to the pink mist faster than Bai Yijian. With a tearing sound, another silver chain shot out from her other sleeve. With a twirl, the chain wrapped around the pink mist. Naturally, the real spirit within it was also sealed. Was it over? From the moment the real spirit had appeared to the moment everyone had fought over it, it had only been a few seconds. The one who had the last laugh was Shangguan Qing'e. However, before Shangguan Qing'e could show her excitement, her face sank. The silver chain shrank and pierced through the pink mist. There was nothing inside, nothing at all. Swoosh! At that moment, a pink light flashed at the end of the silver chain. A pink living creature the size of a palm appeared on the chain. It was a beautiful creature that was pink all over and resembled a qilin. It had a pair of pink qilin horns, dreamy purple eyes, a body full of pink scales, and a small tail that looked like flames. At a glance, it was not a living creature. It was clearly a pink jade statue, which was extremely beautiful. At that moment, the four hooves of the little pink qilin were stepping on the silver chain. Its purple eyes revealed an anthropomorphic mocking expression as it looked down at Shangguan Qing'e and Bai Yijian. After that, it raised its neck and flicked its tail, turning into a cloud of mist and flying away. Bai Yijian's face was filled with joy as he continued his chase. Shangguan Qing'e, on the other hand, was embarrassed. She had actually been looked down upon by a small real spirit. Holding her breath, Shangguan Qing'e also joined in the chase. Just like that, the two fairy realm chased each other crazily in a Milky Way spell formation. However, the qilin was very strange. Every time it was caught, it would appear in another place the next moment. It was like space teleportation, but it was not. Suyu was the only one who was secretly shocked. It was indeed not space teleportation, but void transformation. Every time it was caught, the little qilin's body would turn from a physical state into a state of nothingness. It was like a soul. Therefore, no matter what Bai Yijian and Shangguan Qing'e did, they could not do anything to the little qilin. After a few rounds, the little qilin raised its neck high and swaggered back to the center of the Milky Way, where Suyu was. Moreover, it stood on top of the three black iron boxes, as if there was no one else around. As it opened its mouth, a ferocious sucking force appeared. The three black iron boxes were sucked into the sucking force, becoming smaller and smaller. Finally, they became the size of pebbles and were swallowed into the little qilin's stomach. Within this little qilin's body, there was actually another universe, a space of its own. The dragon tendon had been swallowed by the little qilin. At that moment, the little qilin continued to circle around the central star as if there was no one else around. It seemed to be trying to figure out if it could swallow such a huge star. Chapter 553. Suyu's eyes flashed. He did not chase after it blindly. The little qilin circled around and made up its mind. It bared its teeth at Suyu and Xia Jingyu, who were standing on top of it. It wanted to tell them to leave as it was about to start eating. "Brother Yu, what should we do?" Xia Jingyu stared at the little Kylan with an unfriendly expression. It had stolen Su Yu's dragon tendon. Su Yu pondered for a moment, then looked at the little Kylan meaningfully. He then flew up into the air with the tip of his foot. Xia Jingyu was unwilling to compromise, but she was very obedient to Su Yu and did not want to leave with him. Once there was no one around, the little Kylan happily shook its buttocks and stood up on its hind legs. Its two front hooves were like a human as it rubbed its palms together. It was eager to try. Its spiritual intelligence was extraordinary. Then, the little Kylan opened its mouth and repeated the same trick. An extremely powerful sucking force emerged from its mouth. Su Yu felt as if he had fallen into a whirlpool of turbulent waves. He immediately retreated with Xia Jingyu. Shangguan Qing'er and Bai Yijian, who were chasing after them, did not dare to rush forward. They stood outside the range of the sucking force and watched from afar. Is this beast born with the ability to recognize treasures? This star is not an ordinary meteorite. It was made from the bones of an all creation's old monster demonic beast. It is indestructible, and more importantly, it is extremely heavy. It was once a treasure used by an all creation's old monster. What? This star was Tian Jizi's treasure? At this moment, under the terrifying suction force, the entire planet didn't move at all. On the other hand, two of the surrounding stars were swallowed by the sucking force. Gradually, the little Kylan noticed that something was wrong. It stared angrily with its purple eyes. At this moment, the pink scales on the surface of his body emitted a pink halo that resembled ripples, and the suction force suddenly increased by more than twofold. Su Yu and the others could not help but retreat again, returning to the top of the stairs. From a bird's-eye view, the whole Milky Way was being sucked into the little Kylan's stomach by the sucking force. However, the strange thing was that there was still no movement from the central star. The little Kylan seemed to be angry. Its purple eyes were burning with anger, and the pink scales on its body gradually turned into a weak purple glow. The sucking force doubled again. In an instant, the Milky Way spun in reverse, and all the stars were swallowed into the little Chilan's stomach. Swallowing the Milky Way in one gulp, no one could surpass him in terms of swallowing mountains and rivers. Finally, the central star moved. The entire star swayed slightly, finally showing signs of loosening. However, this only lasted for a moment before the central star suddenly sank and crashed down. Little Chilan groaned in pain and somersaulted in the air. Even with its full strength, the little Kylan could only slightly loosen the central star. But looking at the Milky Way, the meteorites in it were sparse, messy, and broken. Only 10% of the original number remained. The other 90% were all swallowed into the little Kylan's stomach. Only the central star remained unmoved. The little Chilan flew into a rage out of humiliation. It leaped onto the star, and its four little hooves angrily stepped on the star, venting the resentment of its failure. But at this moment, the central star suddenly trembled. The little Chilan, who was standing on it, stared blankly at the ground. Its big purple eyes didn't blink at all. It was extremely puzzled. After a series of tremors, a crack appeared in the center of the central star. When this crack appeared, the wisest Milky Way array suddenly stopped operating. Bai Yijian's eyes shone brightly. It's a flaw. We have to pass through the Milky Way array and enter the final place of the legacy of materials. As he spoke, the little Chilan's eyes shone brightly as it entered the crack. Chase after it. Bai Yijian's face was filled with excitement as he led Bai Zhe into the crack. Bai Qi was next, followed by Su Yu and Xia Jingyu. All of them entered the crack. Finally, Shang Shulian, who had been silent all this while, revealed a meaningful smile as she chased after the little Chilan. After passing through the crack, Su Yu's eyes suddenly lit up. Inside the star, there was actually a space of its own. There was a great bone palace that was 10,000 feet wide. The palace was made entirely out of the bones of demonic beasts of all creations, and it shone with a gentle jade light. In the center of the palace, there were two gigantic beast heads. Each of them was a few hundred feet wide. Even though they had been dead for so long, they were still emitting an extremely powerful and ferocious aura. However, what they were paying attention to was the round pearl that was held in each of the beast heads' mouths. One was a brilliant silvery white, while the other was a dull yellow. The two beast heads were holding the pearls in their mouths, looking at each other from afar. Vaguely, the two pearls seemed to be facing each other from afar. Shangguan Qinger's heart skipped a beat, and she cried out in shock. The underworld pearl of the ghost realm. Bai Yijian's pupil shrank, but his gaze was firmly fixed on the other silver pearl. His eyes were filled with excitement. He seemed to know about the existence of this item, so he was not overly surprised. However, Suyu knew about this item. His eyes were also filled with excitement. If his guess was correct, this item was the thunder material that would be used to forge the first stage of the Desolate Sea Lost Pearl. According to legend, it was a tear that fell from the heavens and the earth, and it possessed an unparalleled thunder attribute. It was one of the best materials for crafting fairy artifacts in the Jiuzhou continent, especially a thunder fairy artifact. For a fairy artifact like the 5-elemental strong thunder seal, it was the main material for entering the second stage of crafting. If it was integrated into the 5-elemental strong thunder seal, it would most likely become a semi-manufactured fairy artifact. Suyu was completely tempted. However, Suyu's gaze suddenly caught sight of a white skeleton lying in front of the beast head of the Desolate Sea Lost Pearl. The white skeleton had long been eroded by the wind, but there was still a weak lightning energy seeping out of it. Suyu could feel a familiar aura coming from the corpse. Thunder Emperor. Suyu's heart sank. At the Thunder Emperor Mountain, Suyu had obtained the 5-elemental strong thunder seal that the Thunder Emperor had left behind in a secret chamber. However, the remains of the Thunder Emperor were not within it. At that time, he had been suspicious. He had not expected the remains of the Thunder Emperor to be in the final place of legacy. How'd he die? The Thunder Emperor was a strong divine master at the time. To be able to avoid the eyes and ears of the guards and enter the place of legacy without anyone noticing showed how powerful he was. It was not normal for him to die here. Looking at the two ferocious beast heads, Suyu suddenly had a very bad feeling. Jingyu, let's retreat quickly. Suyu grabbed onto Xia Jingyu and turned to escape without any hesitation. Even an almighty divine master had died here without a sound. The Great Bone Palace was definitely extremely dangerous. Suyu's strange behavior attracted everyone's attention. They then looked at the skeleton that Suyu had discovered. The remains of an almighty divine master? Shangguan Qinger recognized it immediately, her heart thumping. Of course, she did not think that it was an accident that an almighty divine master had died here. She rolled her eyes and hesitated for a moment before decisively giving up. She quickly retreated, leaving this dangerous place in front of her. The movements of the three of them had caused a chain reaction. The Ghost King, Bai Qi, stared at the underworld pearl, his eyes filled with greed and excitement. However, after noticing the almighty divine master's corpse, he also decisively chose to retreat. Only Bai Yijian and his son did not move. Bai Yijian's mouth was filled with mockery. Isn't it too late to escape now? Bai Yijian laughed coldly. As he said this, the crack that they had entered from closed with a bang. Suyu had almost been caught. His expression sank. Without another word, he took out his small golden sword and slashed at the wall in front of him. The small golden sword easily slashed 3 inches into the wall, as if it was cutting through mud. But immediately after, the small golden sword seemed to have struck something extremely hard. It let out a dull metallic sound and could no longer slash down. Suyu shook his wrist, causing the small golden sword to vibrate. The surrounding soil was shaken off, revealing the object within. It was the bone of an all-creation's demonic beast. The exit had been sealed. The rest of the people also realized the severity of the situation and began to attack the surrounding walls. As the soil fell, the despairing all-creation's demonic beast bone was revealed. The entire interior of the space was a sealed all-creation's demonic beast bone. Even an almighty divine master might not be able to break free if he was trapped, let alone them. The remains of the Thunder Emperor were proof enough. Bai Yijian, is this your plot? Shangguan Qing'er squinted her eyes, her gaze filled with coldness. In fact, she had also sensed that this place was not as simple as the legacy of materials. She had not expected that in a moment of impatience, she had chased after the real spirit and fallen into a trap. Bai Yijian let out a cold laugh, not bothering to hide it. You came here on your own accord. I did not force you. What are you trying to do? What is the point of trapping us? The vital energy in Shangguan Qing'er's body surged, ready to strike at any moment. Bai Yijian's cold laugh became even deeper. Who said I wanted to trap you? What I want is your lives. Only by using the blood of geniuses like you can we activate this star, break open the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, and enter the vast Juzhou continent. We, the descendants of the Guardians, have waited for this day for too long. Shangguan Qing'er's expression turned cold. Wishful thinking. Even all creation's old monsters cannot break open the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion. Why do you have to break open this place and leave? Bai Yijian laughed coldly. Tianjizi left behind many treasures. One of them could kill even all creation's old monsters, let alone break open this place. What? Even all creation's old monsters could be killed? What treasures did Tianjizi leave behind? Everyone's expressions turned serious. Shangguan Qing'er said coldly, So, do you think you and your son can kill all of us? Bai Yijian let out a cold laugh. There is no need for me and my son. My son alone is enough. Let Baizhu alone kill all of them. It sounded like a joke, but no one could laugh. Baizhu's lips curled into a cold smile. What a pity. I had wanted to come in here alone with all of you and kill all of you. I did not expect the situation to change, and my father to come in here as well. That's good too. I can also imitate my father when he killed the Thunder Emperor and kill all of you fairies and half-fairies. Baizhu's aura suddenly turned cold, and his murderous intent was thick. His tone was unusually arrogant. From his words, Su Yu learned a shocking piece of information. Chapter 554. If he hadn't heard it with his own ears, he would have found it hard to believe. Shangguan Qing'er's expression suddenly turned grave. What kind of mysteries were hidden in this place that could even kill almighty divine masters? His heart became extremely uneasy, and he had a very bad feeling. What exactly do you want to do? What benefits do you get from killing us? Shangguan Qing'er did not notice that her tone had gradually weakened. Bai Yijian stood with his arms crossed, smiling coldly without saying a word. Baizhu, on the other hand, was in high spirits. Seeing that even fairy realm experts like Shangguan Qing'er were fearful, he felt extremely carefree. He looked up to the sky and laughed. Didn't I already say that I will use your blood to activate the treasure in this place and break open the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion? There was no doubt that he was arrogant. Su Yu's eyes flickered with a shrewd light. As a golden light flickered in his sleeves, the three small golden swords disappeared into thin air. Looking at Shangguan Qing'er again, although she looked extremely fearful and seemed to be asking seriously, in actual fact, she had taken out a jade pendant from her sleeves and was about to crush it. Xia Jingyu also secretly formed a seal with her hand, ready to strike at any time. Bai Yijian looked around and furrowed his brows. Zhe, take action immediately. We don't want any undue delays. Baizhu's arrogance disappeared when he heard the indifferent reprimand, and his face turned solemn. He took out an incomparably black flute from his bosom. It was about a foot long, and its entire body flickered with a hazy halo of light. It was like black jade, glossy and luxurious. There were 9 orifices on the black jade flute, one more than an ordinary flute. It looked very strange. The strangest thing was that there was a gray bird carved on the flute. The bird was vivid and lifelike, as if it was about to fly out from the flute, especially that pair of emerald green eyes, which seemed to be alive. No matter which angle he looked at it from, it seemed to be looking at him. It was exceptionally strange. Middle-grade spirit weapon. Shangguan Qing'er's expression turned serious. However, What she was serious about was not the black jade flute itself, but the significance of its appearance in this place. The 3 vital energy crystals in Baija's body revolved, and all the vital energy in his body condensed into a ball of qi, which he blew into D from his mouth. As the Zhen qi entered the flute, the black jade flute glowed brightly. A deep black halo flowed in all directions like water. At the same time, a cold and mournful sound of a flute suddenly came from the black jade flute. Suyu had only heard one note, but he already felt his whole body turn cold. What shocked him was that his soul, which was as strong as the fairy realm, actually showed signs of trembling. Most importantly, he realized that his life force was flowing away as the musical note passed through his body. All of a sudden, Suyu felt a sense of weakness. Xia Jingyu was also shocked. Such a strong death aura, and the musical notes are so terrifying. Suyu's heart gradually sank, and he said in a deep voice, "I'm afraid it has yet to reveal its true frightening power." Creak! Suddenly, in the silence of the Great Hall of Bones, where only the sound of the flute was left, a clear creaking sound could be heard. It sounded like something huge was moving and rubbing against the ground. Creak! Creak! Following that, several sounds of friction could be heard. At this extremely tense moment, this strange sound caused one's hair to stand on end. Creak! A series of creaking sounds rang out, and the crowd finally found the source of the sound. When they looked closely, they saw that it was the thousand-jong beast head with the underworld pearl in its mouth. Within the empty eye sockets of the beast head, 2 emerald flames were burning, and whiffs of chilly wind were slowly blowing out from within. The chilly wind was so cold that it sent chills down one's spine, making one shudder. The beast head gradually emitted a strong aura, and whiffs of ferocious energy slowly seeped out from within the bones. In the crowd's perception, a huge, ferocious creature was awakening from its slumber. The beast head is reviving. Shangguan Qing'er stared coldly at the beast head and said in a low voice, "It's the underworld pearl in its mouth. This pearl contains strong yin energy and is very suitable for the survival of ghosts. The remnant soul of the all-creations beast is resting in the underworld pearl. Now it is being controlled by the black jade flute." Hearing that, Suyu and the others' hearts thumped. The remnant soul of the all-creations demonic beast. No wonder Baizhou was so confident, and no wonder the Thunder Emperor had been buried here. Even though it was only a remnant soul, it still had a trace of the remaining power of an all-creations old monster. Moreover, even a divine master expert would find that the remnant power was a heavenly might that they couldn't resist. As the aura emitted by the beast bone grew more and more terrifying, everyone felt a sense of despair. "Let's attack together. Don't give him any more time to control it." Shangguan Qing'er gritted her teeth. Feeling the threat of death, she no longer held back and attacked. Everyone's hearts went cold. How could they still hesitate? Once Baizha completely awakened the all-creation ferocious beast, what awaited them would undoubtedly be death. Under the level of all creations, they could decide their life and death with a single thought. Bai Yijin laughed coldly. If it's too late." Whoosh! A white shadow flashed, and Bai Yijin stood in front of Baizha. He held the long sword in his hand and turned it into a sky-piercing sword qi that swept across the entire area. A crescent-shaped, snow-white sword qi with a radius of 100 feet. Within 100 feet, the space shattered inch by inch, like broken glass, fragmented and fragmented. The crowd, who was about to charge over, hurriedly retreated. This sword was completely the attack of the fairy realm. Even the space was shattered. Who could block it? Even Shangguan Qing'er's expression changed. She shook her sleeves and threw out a space talisman. The talisman exploded, releasing a ball of yellow light that condensed into a yellow tortoise. When the sword qi landed on it, the tortoise's body shook and blocked the sword qi. However, cracks appeared on its body, and it was then turned into dust by the remnant sword qi. One person and one sword, forcing the crowd to retreat. "I will block him. You guys attack together and kill Baizha." A determined look appeared in Shangguan Qing'er's eyes. She shook her sleeves once again, and a golden puppet appeared. This puppet was similar to the one she had used to cross the stone statue forest. The only difference was that when this puppet appeared, it caused the entire space to tremble. Bai Jian's cold expression suddenly froze, and he said in a low voice, "A puppet that contains an attack from a divine master. The person behind your all-creation old monster has indeed prepared a protective treasure for you." Hearing this, everyone's hearts relaxed. Luckily, they had a strong fairy realm martial artist, who is also an all-creation old monster's unofficial disciple. "Since you are seeking your own death, don't blame me for being ruthless." Shangguan Qing'er snorted coldly. She clenched her palms together, and the golden puppet grew in size. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into a Tinzhong, tall, golden giant. It had the appearance of a woman. She was wearing a black robe, and her face was as cold as ice. Her phoenix eyes were filled with stars, as if they contained the entire starry sky. A majestic aura emanated from the golden puppet, causing the air in the great hall of white bones to solidify. It was obviously a puppet, but in their senses, it was as if an almighty divine master had personally descended. Bai Jian's pupils shrank, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He took the initiative to attack first. With a sweep of his sword, a Tinzhong arc swept out in all directions. The space shattered inch by inch, and the cracks spread like a spider web. However, when the shattered space reached the Tinzhong tall statue, it bounced back. The statue's entire body was filled with a golden light, and it was not affected in the slightest. On the contrary, the scattered sword qi caused Bai Jian to have no choice but to retreat. His eyes were filled with shock. "It's over." Shangguan Qing'er's eyes turned cold. The golden puppet raised its arm, and a blood-colored crescent moon gradually appeared in its palm. The moment the blood-colored crescent moon was formed, it gave Bai Jian the feeling that his heart was about to jump out of his chest. The soul in his body felt as if it was being cut open by a sharp blade. His instincts told him that it was a secret technique that could directly harm one's soul. "Jur, quick!" Bai Jian was anxious, and he shouted anxiously. At the same time, he took out the long sword in his hand and threw it into the air. Suddenly, the long sword split into six, and 6 clones appeared at the same time. Shangguan Qing'er snorted coldly, and the blood-colored crescent moon disappeared into thin air. Bang! Suddenly, the 6 swords exploded at the same time. A small crescent moon shot out from the 6 swords at the same time, causing the 6 swords to explode from the inside out. Then, the 6 small crescent moons combined into one, becoming the original crescent moon. A spiritual weapon was destroyed just like that. With his life weapon destroyed, Bai Jian was affected. His heart was damaged, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Seeing that the crescent moon had disappeared once again, Bai Jian was shocked. Without hesitation, he hit the top of his head with his palm and groaned in pain. "Are you the only one who has a divine master-level treasure?" Ding! With a crisp sound, a cyan ruler flew out from the top of his head. The ruler's entire body was overflowing with spiritual light, and unknown Sanskrit words were carved on it. After vital energy was infused into it, layers of space power appeared. Clang! Suddenly, the green ruler flashed in space and disappeared. Then, a sound of something hitting Bai Jian's chest could be heard. The blood-colored crescent moon had arrived in front of his chest without anyone noticing. At the critical moment, the cyan ruler appeared in front of his chest and blocked the attack. Shangguan Qing'er was shocked. He could even block an attack from a divine master? What kind of treasure was this? Humph! The 8-directional flute and the 6-directional ruler are the inherited divine weapons of the Guardians. Unless the divine master himself arrives, what can you do to me? This ruler and the other flute were both middle-grade spiritual weapons, and their power was not to be underestimated. Shangguan Qing'er's face darkened as she weaved a seal with her hands. The blood-colored crescent moon flickered and disappeared again. This time, it appeared on Bai Jian's back. However, the 6-directional ruler was very special. It seemed to have the ability to predict the direction of the attack and teleported to block the crescent moon. Shangwan Qing'er's face turned pale again. Her 10 fingers spun and quickly weaved a seal. The crescent moon teleported quickly, but the six-directional ruler seemed to be able to predict the future and appeared in front of the crescent moon. Oomph! The six-directional ruler is a weapon that Tian Jizi used when he was a divine master. After he broke through to the all creations level, he gave it to his disciple. It contains his divine decree. How can you break through its defense? The divine decree of the path? No wonder it had the ability to predict the future. If that was the case, it would be troublesome. In the next 20 to 30 moves, only the blood-colored crescent moon could be seen colliding with the green light around Baijian. The red and green colors reflected each other, and Baijian was not injured at all. Just as Shangwan Qing'er was about to give up on attacking and take Baijia's life, Baijian flew over and chased after her. She was completely entangled and could not deal with Baijian for the time being. At that moment, the aura of the beast head had already reached the later stage of the fairy realm and was climbing towards the divine master realm. Once it reached the divine master realm, only death awaited them. It's all up to you. Kill Baizhi immediately and end the battle quickly, Shangwan Qing'er shouted in a low voice. Su Yu's eyes flashed coldly. He was already prepared for this. With a thought, a small golden sword appeared from the void around Baizhi and pierced towards his heart. Chapter 555. Same old trick. Baizhi seemed to have been prepared for this. He stuck a snow-white talisman on his body. A layer of light flowed out and covered the surface of his body. All of a sudden, the invincible small golden sword pierced the surface of his body and bounced back like a ripple. A talisman that contains the defense of the fairy realm? Xia Jingyu's expression changed slightly. Su Yu sighed. Although the small golden sword had the ability to teleport, if it was exposed prematurely, its effect would undoubtedly be greatly reduced. If he had 6 other small swords to form the sword formation of 9 swords, there would not have been so much trouble. He would have been killed long ago. It was a pity that the 2 seeds of the heavenly orchid silver bamboo that Lu Chui had given him were still alive. How difficult would it be to gather enough heavenly orchid silver bamboo to craft the small golden swords? Moreover, even if he managed to gather all 9 swords, he would still have to find the original version of the 9 yin-yang formation, the Cosmos 9-Sun sword formation. Now, that Bai Luo was dead, there was no way of knowing the origin of the 9 steel needles, let alone the whereabouts of the Cosmos 9-Sun sword formation. Su Yu's eyes were filled with a cold light. Feeling the murderous aura of the beast head getting stronger, Su Yu's murderous intent intensified. Both of you attacked together. Su Yu bellowed at the Ghost King and Shang Xuelian. Perhaps they were hesitant or worried, but they did not attack. Hearing this, Shang Xuelian stood her ground and did not move. Her eyes shone with a mysterious light. She had decided to stand aside and watch. The Ghost King did not hesitate. He leaped to the other side of Baizhi, forming a pincer attack with Su Yu. Su Yu looked at Shang Xuelian in surprise, then turned his attention to dealing with Baizhi. Inyu, when we were on the stairs, I did not use my trump card for the sake of our tribe's grand plan. Now, I want to see what you can do to me with just 3 small swords. Baizhi had been defeated by Su Yu once, and he still regarded it as a great humiliation. Now, he was trying to find an excuse for himself. Is that so? But I think you are still very weak. Su Yu said indifferently. The black jade ring on his finger shone with a dim light, and a fiery red umbrella appeared in his palm. This object was the Purple Sun incredible umbrella that Lu Chui had refined again. It had been infused with her divine fire, the Red Lotus Fury Flame. This flame was ranked 1,000 on the Divine Flame list, and its ranking was quite low. However, according to Lu Chui, it was a terrifying flame that could even melt a later stage fairy. Although the newly refined Purple Sun Profound Umbrella did not contain the raging Red Lotus Flame, the flame it released was not something the Purple Sun Flame could compare to. The Purple Sun Profound Umbrella should be renamed to the Red Lotus Profound Umbrella. Semi-manufactured spiritual weapon? The Ghost King smiled. You've gained a lot after a month. Suyu looked at him meaningfully, then calmly said, "Let's get rid of Baija first." The Ghost King took another look at the red lotus mystic umbrella and nodded his head. His powerful body directly crossed over and attacked Baija. Baija was pushed back by the power of his fists, which seemed to be able to topple mountains and overturn seas. However, it didn't even cause any damage because most of the power was reflected by the water barrier. Baija sneered, "It's useless. Just wait for your death." However, at that moment, his brows suddenly twitched, and he felt a sense of danger. When he looked back, he saw that Suyu was standing 100 feet away from him, and the fiery red umbrella had been opened. Chapter 556. Whoosh! Suddenly, the red umbrella radiated a red flame that was hundreds of feet long. The flame was like a wave, rolling forward like a blooming red lotus, extremely beautiful and breathtaking. However, the high temperature released by the red lotus was terrifying. The temperature of the entire Great Bone Palace doubled. Everyone felt as if they had fallen into a furnace, and they hurriedly used their vital energy to protect their bodies. In the Great Bone Palace, apart from the incomparably hard inner walls of the bones, the two beast heads, and the people who had protected their bodies with vital energy, everything else had been burned into nothingness. Baija's cold smile froze, and his eyes were filled with fear. His heart was filled with a strong sense of unease. Looking at Suyu's calm expression, his hair stood on end. That expression was one of absolute confidence that he could kill him. Feeling the danger of the place, Baijian's eyebrows twitched. He had a premonition that things were not going well. This Inu was scarier than he had imagined. Not only did he have 3 semi-manufactured spiritual artifacts, but he also had a semi-manufactured red lotus incredible umbrella. Use the blood gourd. However, you can only drink 10 drops at most. Baijian was unusually decisive. Baija's eyes were filled with excitement as he licked his lips. "Hee, I haven't been refining it for long, so I'll start with you." After saying this, Baija took out a blood-red gourd. The gourd had a ferocious ghost face carved on it. The gourd emitted a pungent smell of blood. The Ghost King's expression changed. Could this be the ghost gourd? Looking deeply at Baija, the Ghost King laughed mockingly. "Your hearts are really cruel. After using the ghost gourd, it can temporarily increase one's strength. The principle is to seal the flesh and soul of a strong martial artist in the gourd and brew it into blood wine. After drinking it, one can temporarily obtain the cultivation and strength of the sealed martial artist. However, such an evil technique requires people of the same bloodline. Looking at your gourd, I'm afraid you have killed at least 100 people. If I remember correctly, there are only 100 people in this generation of the Guardian bloodline. Could it be that you and your father have killed all of your people?" His words sent chills down one's spine. Speaking of which, after Suyu had entered the mountain, apart from the half-fairy guard that he had met in the underground lava of the Legacy of Craftsmanship, the rest of the guards had disappeared into thin air. Their stronghold was empty. More importantly, Suyu had once sensed a bloody aura from Baija's body. It was the aura of someone who had just killed someone. Based on this deduction, the bloodline of the guardians that had disappeared were probably all stored in this bloody gourd. Suyu's heart turned cold. He had slaughtered his own clan members and refined them all into blood wine. What kind of evil heart was this? Most of the vicious and evil people might not have the heart to do it. However, the father and son duo did not have any expression on their faces. It really made people feel a chill down their spines. Baija's expression stiffened as he glared at the Ghost King. His eyes flashed with malice. He had not expected that Bai Qi would be able to see through their secret. Bai Yijian's expression was also very ugly. "You know too much." His words were undoubtedly admitting that the so-called transfer of the Guardians was actually just an excuse. They had already become a gourd of blood wine. The father and son had repeatedly said that breaking open the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion was the long-cherished wish of many of their people. Chapter 557. Baija was filled with murderous intent. "It doesn't matter. You're all going to die anyway. So what if you know? That's right, they're all in this gourd. If they don't sacrifice themselves, How are they going to break the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion? Now, all that's left is the blood essence of you geniuses with the strongest bloodlines. Baija shouted in a low voice. He quickly but carefully drank a mouthful of it. There were only about 10 drops of it. He didn't drink more than 1 drop. As for the reason, the cultivation and power of the whole clan was contained in the blood wine, so one could only imagine how terrifying the energy contained in the gourd was. Not to mention a mouthful, even a drop of it was not something that anyone below the half-fairy level could bear. 10 drops was Baija's limit. He didn't dare drink more than 1 drop. Suyu's eyes turned cold as he flipped his wrist. The red lotus incredible umbrella rotated in the air. The red flames in the sky seemed to have received a command and started to swirl back crazily, turning into a tornado that engulfed Baija. The angry red lotus flames bloomed, and the water barrier around Baija's body shattered with a cracking sound. The boundless flames engulfed Baija in an instant. However, within the red flames, his blurry figure didn't show any signs of melting. Instead, it became clearer and clearer. An aura that was gradually becoming stronger rose from within the flames. The angry red lotus flames that filled the sky were split in half by a powerful force, revealing the figure within. Baija's clothes were destroyed, and his hair was gone. However, his body was as shiny as new, like steel. There were no signs of being burned. Suyu was secretly surprised. Even an ordinary early-stage fairy would be burned to death, yet Baija was unharmed. 10 drops of blood essence had raised his cultivation to a very high level. At the very least, he was at the level of a peak early-stage fairy. Too weak. Baija laughed disdainfully as he swept his right leg around. In an instant, a violent gust of wind swept out in all directions, and the red lotus fury was swept away. Suyu tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and retreated with Xia Jingyu. There was still a bit of flame that splashed onto his clothes, causing his sleeves to be slightly burned. However, before Suyu could react, he heard a mocking voice. "Your reaction is too slow." With a blur, Baiju appeared next to Suyu as if he had teleported. His palm was engulfed in terrifying vital energy, and he aimed it at the top of Suyu's head. It seemed like he was going to kill Suyu on the spot. Suyu's expression was calm. As a golden light flashed in his sleeves, 3 small golden swords appeared beside Suyu out of thin air and pierced towards Baija's palm. Baija laughed coldly. "It's useless." True chi condensed in his palms, and he grabbed the 3 small golden swords in his hands at lightning speed. Moreover, he immediately enveloped Suyu with his majestic vital energy, cutting off his connection with Suyu. Hence, it would be impossible for them to teleport back to Suyu's hand. His weapon had been stolen. Suyu was slightly surprised, but he took the opportunity to put some distance between them. Baija held the 3 small golden swords in his hands and chuckled. "These are good things. I will accept them. Don't hate me. Blame yourself for being too weak." Suyu's eyes glowed with a thoughtful expression. In terms of abilities and cultivation level, Shungu seemed to be slightly weaker than him, even though they were both at the early stage of the fairy realm. This was partly because Shungu had yet to display the true fighting power of the fairy realm, but it was also partly because of the gap in their cultivation levels. Shungji's cultivation was only at the early stage of the fairy realm, while Baija was at the peak of the early stage. Hence, there was a huge gap between the two of them. Chapter 558. In terms of true power, Baija was no match for Suyu. Baija laughed mockingly. "So what? The strong are the strong. The weak are the weak. If you also have such a treasure, I won't say anything." Unexpectedly, Suyu nodded earnestly. "Fine, since you said so, I will surely fulfill your wish." Baija's mocking expression gradually disappeared, and he asked skeptically, "You still have a treasure to protect yourself? As a disciple of the Gui Yuan sect, how many benefits did your sect give you? Even if you're specially sent here, the things you've given me are too exaggerated." So you did not take out any magical treasures. Instead, he calmly clenched his fists and looked at Baija. "You have misunderstood me. I do not need to use other magical treasures to deal with you." As he clenched his fist, The air around him seemed to be suppressed by something. The air in the sealed space gathered in Su Yu's palm crazily, causing the rest of the space to become a vacuum zone where one could not breathe. Bai Yijian and Shangwan Qing'er, who were fighting, were both shocked. Both of them revealed shocked expressions at the same time. Legendary level techniques? Moreover, it has a certain level of maturity. The two of them were very surprised, especially Shangwan Qing'er. As an all creations, old monsters register disciple, she was no stranger to legendary level techniques. In fact, she had even been given a fragmented page. It was so profound that ordinary people couldn't imagine it. Under the guidance of her master, she had only just touched the edge of the rudiments. If she wanted to take another step forward, she would need at least 3 years of hard work. However, Su Yu, an unknown disciple, had actually cultivated it to the upper class level. Even the old fairy realm experts, who had stepped into the fairy realm many years ago, did not have the confidence to cultivate it to the upper class. How old was Su Yu? How high was his cultivation base? His actions gave Shangwan Qing'er an indescribable shock. She swore that there were not more than 10 people like Su Yu who had cultivated a legendary level cultivation technique to the upper class at such a young age. And those 10 were all future divine masters of their sex. Bai Yijian was also surprised. He had been trying to comprehend legendary level cultivation techniques for many years, but he had only managed to comprehend them to the lower city realm. How did Su Yu manage to achieve such a level? At the same time, a sense of alarm rose in his heart and his expression changed. Baizhou was in danger. It was impossible to predict the might of a legendary cultivation technique that had reached the large success stage. After all, different cultivation techniques had different levels of power. The only thing he could be sure of was that it wasn't something his son could withstand. Sure, run. Bai Yijian roared angrily. He swept Shangwan Qing'er away with his sword and charged towards Su Yu. His heart thumped wildly. Unexpected, too unexpected. Su Yu had actually hidden his abilities so well. Not to mention his son. Even if he were to face Su Yu himself, it was highly likely that he would be killed by the legendary level cultivation technique. In terms of battle prowess, he was even more terrifying than Shangwan Qing'er, and he actually left such a terrifying enemy to his son to deal with. As he chased after them angrily, Shangwan Qing'er was overjoyed. Haha, old thief Bai, you want to leave? If you want to kill us, then we'll let you see how your son is killed. He shook his sleeves, and a silver chain shot out from his sleeves again, wrapping around Bai Yijian. Once again, Shangwan Qing'er switched places with Bai Yijian and stood in front of Su Yu. She then looked at the furious Bai Yijian with a cold smile. Here, me, get lost. Bai Yijian's eyes were bloodshot, and his expression was one of extreme anger. His face was contorted, and he looked like an angry lion. Chapter 559. Shangwan Qing'er laughed coldly, then turned to Su Yu and said, "Let's end this quickly and kill that little thief." Su Yu nodded slightly. All the air in the space had been gathered in his palm, and the rest of the space had become a vacuum. Even sound could not be transmitted. All the air was compressed in Su Yu's palm. Moreover, it was still being compressed from the size of palm to the size of a fist, and from the size of a fist to the size of an eyeball. Visible to the naked eye, the compressed air mass gradually turned from hazy cyan to dark cyan, and then from dark cyan to dark gray. Finally, when all the air was compressed to the size of a little finger, it became pitch black. Within that pitch black color, there were flashes of lightning. This was the lightning produced by the friction between the compressed air. The destructive power contained within the small ball was unprecedented. The whole space could feel that Su Yu was holding something that made one's hair stand on end. Baizhi's face stiffened. His whole body felt cold as he stared at the black ball, his eyelids twitching wildly. Bai Yijian roared angrily. Unfortunately, in the vacuum, he could not make a sound. He could only watch as his son faced the compressed air alone, which could destroy even him. Su Yu's palm trembled slightly, and streaks of blood flowed from the gaps between his fingers. The intensely compressed air was a huge burden to his palm. The blood in his body was forcefully suppressed, and it flowed out of his pores. However, his eyes were filled with excitement. Buddha Saint's 8 characters Upper Success Volume Fight. Its power was even more terrifying than he had imagined. Even a middle-stage fairy would be wary of it. Are you ready? Suyu raised his head and looked at Bai Zhe. With a smile, he threw out the compressed air that was the size of an eyeball. Creak! The black ball rolled past, but it was like a long knife drawing a long black line into space. It was a sign that the space was about to shatter. Wherever it passed, the space was completely shattered. Bai Zhe was terrified. He no longer had the arrogance that Suyu had when he was weak. With fear in his heart, he ran away. However, to his despair, the small black ball had a very strong consciousness. It had locked onto him and was madly chasing after him. In the blink of an eye, the small black ball had caught up to him. At this moment, layers of thunder and lightning burst out from the inside of the black ball. A terrifying aura of destruction surged out from the inside of the black ball. The destructive force shattered a large area of space, including Bai Zhe, into pieces. Bai Yijian's pupils dilated, and he was in a daze. His son was dead. Shangguan Qing'er revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. She looked at the beast's head, whose aura was gradually weakening, and heaved a sigh of relief. From the looks of it, he had managed to make it in time at the last moment. That beast head had almost recovered its divine master cultivation, and the consciousness of its remnant soul was about to awaken. Once that happened, they would all die here. Everything was a close shave. However, Suyu didn't look happy at all. Instead, his face was gloomy. Why are you doing this? It was not hard to hear the anger in his deep voice. The unexpected sound caused Shangguan Qing'er to be startled. She looked at the shattered space once again, and a scene that caused her pupils to shrink appeared in front of her. In the shattered space, a 3-zhong-tall giant figure stood majestically. The figure's entire body was pitch black, and it had a green face and fangs. Its 2 blood-red eyes were like lanterns, and it looked extremely horrifying. Chapter 560. The wings were flapping rapidly, creating a piercingly cold air current that protected the space around them, and Bai Zhe in the center. This is an evil spirit? Shangguan Qing'er was sucked in a breath of cold air, her eyes filled with fear. Impossible. How could there be such a strong ghost in a mysterious, heavenly, divine pavilion? Didn't they retreat to the world of ghosts and souls 100 years ago? Suyu's eyes turned cold, his killing intent rising. Bai Qi, give me a reason not to kill you. The person who had attacked was none other than the Ghost King, Bai Qi. Suyu could never have imagined that the one who saved Bai Zhe in the end and caused them to fall back into the shadow of death was the Ghost King. He was also on the must-kill list. A complicated expression appeared on Bai Qi's face as he coldly harumphed. Kill him? You have yet to ask this king's opinion on this. As soon as it finished speaking, it spread its wings and flew away from the danger zone with Bai Zhe. Bai Zhe's face was pale, and his legs were weak. He looked at Suyu with a tinge of fear in his eyes, but more than that, it was the fear of getting rid of Suyu. Therefore, he immediately continued to inject his true qi into the 8-directional bamboo flute. With a buzzing sound, the beast's aura, which was gradually weakening, rose once again, and with an extremely fast speed, it surpassed the barrier of the fairy realm. Instantly, the entire Great Hall of Bones began to tremble. From the outside, one would notice that the entire 5 mountains were trembling, as if heaven and earth were collapsing. Above the 5 mountains, dark clouds gathered and thunder rumbled. Not long after, heavy rain poured down. The rare phenomenon caused the geniuses in front of the stone statue forest to feel their hearts racing. On a certain mountain in the 5 peaks, a silver figure flashed like a ghost. The Great Bone Hall was quickly filled with a terrifying pressure. The aura of a divine master was like a giant mountain pressing down on them. It made them feel despair, and they couldn't even muster the will to resist. Roar! A low and powerful roar came out from the beast's mouth. Everyone trembled when they heard this, and their bodies felt like they were about to collapse. Suyu's heart sank. The Divine Master Realm was an absolute gap between them. They had failed in the end. Bai Jian, whose face was filled with anger, suddenly laughed out loud. Ha ha! The heavens are helping me. Looking at Bai Jian laughed. Thank you for your help. He had no qualms about the other party's identity as a ghost. Bai Qi waved his hands and said, There is no need to thank me. I only saved him because I hope that you will succeed in breaking into the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion. I also want to take this opportunity to leave the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion. Speaking of which, his goal was the same as Shang Ji's, which was to enter the Jiuzhou continent through the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion. Well said. At the very most, we will release more of the Ghost Gourd's blood wine. That way, we will be able to stimulate the beast's head and break through the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion. Bai Jian would naturally not offend the Ghost King at such a critical juncture. A smile appeared on Bai Qi's face. Since that is the case, I will leave the rest to you, clan leader Bai. When he finished speaking, he retreated to Baijia's side to protect him. Bai Jian cupped his fists and thanked him. Thank you. Let me handle the rest myself. There are some people that I wish I could hack into 1,000 pieces. With an ominous glint in his eyes, he glared at Shangguanqing. If not for Brother Bai Qi's help, my son would have died here. Don't you like to stop people? What else do you want to say now? The first person he wanted to kill was Shangguanqinger. Shangguanqinger's face turned green, and her expression was extremely ugly. Chapter 561. Bai Jian's face was full of anger as he coldly turned around and shouted at Baizhi. Kill her. Baizhi nodded, and a similar look of hatred appeared in his eyes. When he was in danger, this woman had repeatedly blocked his father's rescue. She deserved to die 10,000 times. Baizhi raised the 8 Desolations flute and blew it with his true qi. A low and deep voice floated out with a murderous and cold aura. 2 green beams of light shot out from the eyes of the resurrected beast head that were burning with ghostly green flames. The beam of light shot straight at Shangguanqing. Shangguanqinger's facial expression changed drastically, and she hurriedly took out the golden doll. The puppet released the aura of a divine master, protecting Shangguanqinger behind it. After a while, the expected collision between the light pillar and the stone statue did not occur. Shangguanqinger felt that something was off. She stuck her head out from behind the giant puppet, but the green light pillar had already disappeared. He seemed to have successfully avoided it. However, she discovered that Su Yu and Xia Jingyu were looking at her with an unsightly expression. They were both shocked, but they also felt pity for her. Tick-tock. Suddenly, a dripping sound came from beneath Shangguanqinger's feet. She looked down subconsciously, but she did not raise her head again. In his eyes, her body had disappeared without a trace. Only 2 legs, 2 arms, and a head with a layer of skin attached to the arms were left. The light beam ignored the puppet and turned Shangguanqinger's body into nothingness. His eyes gradually dimmed, then turned black, and he completely lost consciousness. A fairy realm expert had been killed so easily. Moreover, the indestructible Great Hall of White Bones was also cracked by the green beam of light. Baizhi was in high spirits, and the hatred in his eyes deepened. He looked at Su Yu and said coldly, Yingyu, it's your turn. Su Yu's heart sank, and he said in a low voice, Jingyu, retreat. Baizhi had come for him. There was no sign of panic on Xia Jingyu's beautiful face. Instead, she was as calm as ever. She did not retreat. Instead, she moved closer to Su Yu's side. She placed her arm against Su Yu's, and a calm smile blossomed on her face. Only when the mountains are flat and the heavens and the earth are united will I dare to fight with you. In the face of death, she felt an inexplicable sense of relief. A beautiful and holy smile bloomed on her lips, but also hid a hint of regret and sadness. Perhaps this is the other kind of ending that I want. She couldn't spend a lifetime with Su Yu. However, death had helped her achieve her goal. Dying together with Su Yu was perhaps the humblest and only arrangement that fate had given her. In life, they could not share a pillow, but in death, they might be able to sleep together. When the mountains have no edges and the heavens and the earth merge, only then will they dare to go against the monarch. Suyu deeply felt the friendship in his words, and the more he felt this way, the heavier his heart became. How could he bear Xia Jingyu's love? You're still being lovey-dovey even in death. Fine, I'll fulfill your wish and send you down to be a ghost couple. Baizhi coldly snorted. Suyu and Xia Jingyu's calmness did not give him the satisfaction of killing them. Baizhi raised the 8 desolation flute and imbued it with his Jinqi. However, right at this moment, a pink mist suddenly appeared above Baizhi's head without any warning. 2 pink and tender hooves emerged from the cloud and stepped on Baizhi's face without any hesitation. Ouch! Baizhi was caught off guard and was stepped on by a hoof. He cried out involuntarily. Just as he was about to curse angrily, he suddenly felt that his palm was empty. When he opened his eyes, he found that the 8 desolation flute had disappeared. 100 feet away, a cute pink Kylan was holding the 8 desolation flute in its mouth, and it was hopping around excitedly. It was the real spirit Kylan. Chapter 562. The sudden scene caused by Ijian's face to stiffen, and he immediately became furious. Evil creature, how dare you ruin my plans? Brother Ghost, please lend me a hand and capture this little Qilin. Baiqi had not expected such a thing to happen. After struggling for a while, he had no choice but to join forces with Bai Ijian to capture the small Kylan. This was a sealed space, so even if the little Qilin was proficient in escaping techniques, it wouldn't be able to escape from the White Bone Hall. Sooner or later, it would be caught by them. Seeing that the 2 of them were about to join hands to capture it, the little Qilin swept its tail and proudly raised its head, swaggering over to the beast head that had been activated. He also condensed a mass of true energy in his mouth and blew the 8 directional flute. The beast head's eyes flashed with green light and shot out 2 beams of light. Bai Ijian and the Ghost King's faces changed, and they hurriedly dodged the attack. Luckily, the little Kylan seemed to be unable to completely control the 8 directional flute as the green light pillar deviated from its angle and shot out from the top of its head. Bang! A human-sized hole was punched through the solid white bone hull, just enough for one person to escape through. The rustling sound scared the little Qilin into shrinking its neck. It timidly swallowed the 8 desolation flute into its stomach and prepared to escape. But before he escaped, he jumped into the beast's mouth and swallowed the underworld pearl. The underworld pearl contained the remnant soul of the beast's head. If it was swallowed, the beast bone would become a dead object. Stop! Bai Ijian was both shocked and angry. This beast bone was the key to breaking into the mysterious, heavenly divine pavilion. The little Kylan snorted in disdain. It opened its mouth and held the underworld pearl in its mouth. Then it raised its neck and swallowed it. Then it immediately turned into a pink mist and disappeared. At that moment, Bai Ijian and the Ghost King had just arrived. While they were chasing after the small Kylan, Suyu and Xia Jingyu quietly went to the top of the Great Bone Palace. Xia Jingyu had already escaped, leaving only Suyu behind. Trying to run? Stay here. Bai Ijian was so anxious that his eyes turned red. With a loud roar, he chased after him in a flash. He wanted to pull Xia Jingyu down, but Suyu pushed him away with his vital energy. Jingyu, run. I'll find a way to meet up with you. Suyu was afraid that Xia Jingyu would do something stupid and jump down again. So, he took out a pearl and sealed the gap. Bai Ijian was a step too late, and he was furious. The blood sacrifice ceremony was just about to succeed, but in the end, Suyu appeared first, followed by the small Kylan. Everything was messed up. My clan's long-cherished wish has been completely destroyed by you and that little bastard. Don't even think about leaving. Bai Ijian was furious, and he roared as he attacked. Suyu's gaze became ice-cold. Not only was he not flustered, but he was also filled with killing intent. Fine, I've tolerated you for a long time. Even without Jingyu around, I can still unleash my full potential. Bang! All of a sudden, the blue pearl that filled the gap appeared in front of Suyu in a flash. Suyu injected vital energy into the blue pearl for the first time. Previously, he had always used spiritual qi to control it, but this time he infused it with true qi. The blue orb shone brighter than ever before. At the same time, he growled, "Brother Gue, let's attack together. There's something strange about this kid." Suyu's legendary level cultivation technique by Yi Jian was still fresh in his mind. How could he not be on guard? The Ghost King stood where he was, his face flickering with struggle, as if he was very unwilling, but under some kind of pressure, he gritted his teeth and rushed over. Chapter 563. Bai Yijian looked over and saw that Suyu's palm was still bleeding profusely. It was obvious that Suyu's injury was very serious. This was caused by him forcefully compressing the air. If he were to use it again, his arm would probably be crippled. Oomph. So what if we let him use it? The three of us can't kill him? Bai Yijian secretly heaved a sigh of relief, but his face was filled with anger. The situation had turned into Suyu facing two strong men of the fairy realm by himself. However, he was still unusually calm. Whether you can kill me or not is another matter. However, I will take your precious son's life today. After saying this, Suyu softly commanded, "Kill." With this command, the three small golden swords that Baizha had retrieved suddenly shot out a wisp of vital energy from them, breaking through the restraints. In order to prevent the golden swords from being taken away, Suyu had already prepared to inject a wisp of vital energy into them to deliver an unexpected blow. How could his weapon be so easily taken away? Bai Yijian's expression changed drastically, and his eyes widened in anger. No, Baizha's face was ashen as well. At such a close distance, there was no time to release a defensive barrier. Chi! With a dull thud, Baizha's heart was pierced through. Then, a golden light flashed on his neck. Another flying sword spun around and sliced his neck off. The last golden sword pierced through the head that had fallen to the ground. As such, Baizha was dead, and there was no way he could be saved. Son! Bai Yijian let out a heart-wrenching roar. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like an angry, evil spirit. His face was even more ferocious than Bai Chi's. "I will tear you apart." Bai Yijian let out a low growl like a ferocious beast. Suyu coldly said, "You have no qualms about killing others, but when your own son is killed, you become so angry? Oof. I don't care. I will tear you apart. I will tear you apart." Bai Yijian let out a deafening roar. Suyu's palm suddenly flashed, and a thunder sword appeared without warning. It was covered with green thunderbolts, emitting a rather terrifying aura. In the underground lava, the fairy realm white-eyed Fireglass doll had died at the hands of the Cosmos Thunder Sword. Although his vital energy was not enough to unleash such a strike, with the storage of a vital energy crystal, its power was still extraordinary. Be careful. Bai Chi could only warn Bai Yijian, who had lost his mind. However, even if Suyu did not lose his mind, how could Bai Yijian avoid it? Even if San had not lost his mind, how could he have avoided it? Imbuing vital energy into the Cosmos Thunder Sword, Suyu slashed down from the sky. Rumble! It was as if a thunderbolt had struck. At the same time, a clear white light flashed, and a 500 feet long sword chi sliced through the air. Bai Yijian was caught off guard and was hit by the sword chi. He screamed in pain as his chest was cut open, and his flesh and blood flew everywhere. His entire body was scorched black by the high temperature of the lightning. He was injured on the spot. However, the injured Bai Yijian immediately took out a pill from his pocket and threw it into his mouth. His flesh body recovered at a shocking speed and was back to normal in the blink of an eye. Apart from being a little dispirited, it was impossible to tell that he had just suffered a lightning strike. The effect of this pill was similar to the flesh regeneration elixir of the Jinlong continent. The difference was that this pill took effect immediately and was of a much higher grade than the flesh regeneration elixir. Suyu was shocked, but immediately understood. The descendants of the Guardians had stolen a large amount of legacies, and the elixirs had probably all been plundered by them. With Tian Jizi's abilities, It was not surprising that he had left behind such an elixir. This made things a little tricky. His opponent could not be seriously injured in a short period of time, let alone killed. However, they could not do anything to sue you for the time being. Chapter 564. After half a cup of tea's time, the three of them had fought for hundreds of rounds. Su Yu's vital energy and physical strength had been greatly depleted, and his body was slightly injured. However, Bai Jian and Bai Qi were not at an advantage either, as both of them had suffered a blow from the Cosmos Thundersword. This was especially true for the Ghost King, as he was a ghost. Thus, the thunder had a suppressive effect on him, so the damage was even greater. After a round of fighting, they could not do anything to each other. "What can you do to me? I advise you to quickly find that real spirit Kylan. Otherwise, you will lose both your life and your wealth. Don't blame me for not reminding you," Su Yu said coldly as he took a few steps back. Bai Jian was shocked. His and the Ghost King's original goal was to find that damned little Kylan. He had thought that he could easily get rid of Su Yu, but instead his son had been killed by Su Yu. Now, they were in a situation where they would not rest until one of them was dead. Should he continue fighting Su Yu, or should he look for the little Kylan? Who knew if they would be careless during the fight, and the little Kylan would escape? The intelligence it displayed was quite high. Bai Jian hesitated. Was it more important to avenge his son, or to leave the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion? Just as he was thinking, a calm and unruffled voice came from the gap. "Fight! Why don't you fight?" Su Yu froze. This voice, after that, his expression was completely solemn. He looked at the Ghost King, who was equally serious. His eyes were filled with unconcealable fear. Bai Jian was the only one who did not know where he had come from. He coldly asked, "Who are you? Why are you hiding there? What are you up to?" "Hiding? Hee. You're just too weak to sense my existence." A streak of silver light slowly fell from the gap. A silvery figure, which was shining with a silver light, floated down. Bai Jian sensed it and was shocked. He could not sense this person's aura. There were two possibilities for this situation. The first was that this person's cultivation was far above his, so he could not sense its aura. The second was that this person was not human at all. After sensing it, he was certain of the second possibility. He was slightly relieved and said coldly, "You are just a non-human puppet. Do you think you can meddle in other people's business?" In the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, only Bai Jian could display abilities that surpassed the fairy realm. The non-human puppet in front of him had never been mentioned by his ancestors, so it must be an outsider. In a situation where his opponent was unable to use their full strength, he was, of course, an almost invincible existence. The silver figure's light gradually faded, revealing a face that was no different from a real person's. His silver clothes fluttered without any wind. A faintly discernible evil smile hung on the corner of his mouth. "Hee, it's true that I'm an inhuman puppet, and it's also true that I don't want to meddle in your business." Bai Jian frowned. "Then, why are you here? Do you want to die? As a puppet, it's truly rare for you to be able to cultivate your own consciousness. If you don't want to be erased, then leave immediately." The abilities of the three of them could be measured by the fairy realm. In Bai Jian's eyes, this puppet was courting death by barging in recklessly. Why am I here? Why don't you ask the two of them?" He was naturally the silver puppet that had chased them all the way from the 7th level of the divine pavilion. Su Yu and the Ghost King's hearts sank to the bottom at the same time. They had actually been trapped in such a sealed space by him. He wasn't any weaker than the beast head. In fact, he was even more terrifying, because he didn't need anyone to control him. He only had one goal, which was to devour all the living creatures he could devour in order to recover his cultivation. Bai Jian was secretly shocked. His eyes narrowed as he asked, "Do you know him?" We saw that Su Yu and the Ghost King had ugly expressions on their faces. Bai Jian's heart skipped a beat. He had a bad premonition. He decisively chose to retreat and keep his distance. However, just as he was retreating, the silver puppet laughed evilly. "It seems like you have understood. If that's the case, you can go on your way." Creak! Countless blood-colored threads suddenly shot out from his pores and swept out like a tsunami Baijian's expression changed greatly. He hurriedly took out a talisman. After it exploded, the aura of a middle-stage fairy filled the air. From the talisman, a giant shield was formed. This shield could withstand an attack from a middle-stage fairy. It was a treasure that Baijian was reluctant to use. However, before Baijian could relax, the shield cracked open with a cracking sound. A sea of blood, which filled the sky, gushed forth and engulfed him. A horrible shriek could be heard coming from beneath the sea of blood. Then it stopped abruptly. The silver puppet happily enjoyed the feeling. He sighed. The tonic of the fairy realm is indeed extraordinary. Its silver light became even more dazzling. Its cultivation of the later stage fairy realm was showing signs of breaking through to the divine master level. As the sea of blood returned to its body, not a single trace of blood was left behind. Baijian, a dignified fairy, had died without a trace. With an evil smile on its face, the silver puppet's gaze turned and landed on Suyu. It then laughed coldly. "Little brat, in the end, you still did not manage to escape from my grasp." Up until now, he had only written the outline and outline in the morning. As such, he had not written much of the main text. Hence, the contents of these few chapters were very short.